Yeah, a little bit. We've got like. Right. It's not on there, so there's nothing we can do for it. So, oh, it's okay. I mean, it happens. Also, anyway, don't worry. Hey, great. How are you doing? See ya.
Hey, Mayor, how you doing? Hey, long time no see. That is a hard play.
I just forgot my phone. His back hurts like I can't look it up. Hey, great. How are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, go ahead and start. Ready? All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here to our Board of County Commissioners meeting. As always, we start with a prayer, reading, or thought, and the Pledge of Allegiance. And we look to the audience to participate with us with a prayer, reading, or thought and the pledge. Are there any volunteers who would like to participate with us? What would you like to do? The prayer? Would you come up? Would you just make sure and state your name? Anybody for the pledge? Thank you.
My name is Deanna Holland. Our kind and gracious Heavenly Father, we're so very grateful that we could be gathered here today, that we could be gathered as a community, as those who serve the community, that we may do thy will, that we may do what is right. We're grateful for the blessings that we have in this wonderful land in America and in Utah and in Utah County. Please bless us that we will make wise decisions and that we can continue to love and care for each other. In this we pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Miriam Christensen.
Thank you, and thank you for participating with us with those items. In looking at our agenda, we have a number of items that are on our published consent agenda and our regular agenda. And what we like to do is we like to take everything from consent agenda and our regular agenda and move them temporarily to a consent agenda, meaning that everything on the agenda will be either passed, approved, or agreed to. And then we will build an agenda in which we pull things off from that now consent agenda to be talked about and reviewed or discussed. And so with that, and by the way, if we get to an agenda item that you would like to speak to, you can come up to the microphone, please state your name, and you can speak to any agenda item that we have. And then also, at the end, for general public comment, there is a section there for anything that's not on our agenda. So with that, we have, again, a number of published consent agenda items. I got one question on number 1. It appears that number 1 and number 8 are the same, except for the date, 24th and 25th. Are they the same, or are they separate warrant registers? They're the same? Oh, okay. So then we could probably just strike number 1, if that's fine with the commission. Okay, so consent to strike item number 1 on the consent agenda. In number 9 on the published consent agenda, right at the very beginning of the first paragraph, first sentence, the word "as" needs to be removed. It should just start off Congress. And if the commission's fine with that. I reviewed that with legal counsel. Are you fine with that?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Okay, looking at our published regular agenda, if we could hold number 1 for discussion. If we could hold number 2 for our presentation. And if we could hold number 3 and 4 for discussion. Number 7 and 8 for discussion. We need to take action on number 9, so we need to hold 9. And then Robert Baxter, is he here? There you are. If we could hold number 10 for some discussion there. I was asked that we strike, there's no agreement on there for number 16. It's all right with the commission if we could strike number 16 on regular. And then it's been proposed that we table number 22.
Without date, right?
Probably
table
today,
into
for
closed
today,
session.
for
Yeah.
closed
Or,
session.
excuse me.
Yeah,
I was reading the wrong
till
one.
after
Table
closed
for
session.
after. I was ahead
Okay,
of myself
yeah.
there. Sorry, Bill.
Okay. And then, and I have to explain this one, number 29. Are there people, I hate to ask this, but I'm gonna ask, are there people here to talk to number 29? On 29 on regular? Good, okay. So that was number 29. We tried to get the word out that it was probably not gonna be addressed. And so we need to continue that indefinitely if that's okay with the commission. Yeah. That was just a kind of a mistake that happened when scheduling. It was continued indefinitely before and not ready. All right. Any others, commissioners? No. All right. Okay, then we'll go back to, that was taken care of. Item number 1 on regular agenda is to adopt a resolution declaring Utah County support for protecting all human life. Typically what we do on this, this is something that I put on there. It's a proposal I'm putting before the commission to vote on. It is a resolution. I think we need to understand what resolutions are. It's not a binding resolution, but as a thought leader, as all of us are in the community, we have an opportunity, and we get asked questions all the time. I remember somebody coming up to me and saying, "Tell me what your thought is on the Law of the Sea Treaty." Now, you all know about the Law of the Sea Treaty, and I just happen to know a little bit about the Law of the Sea Treaty, but it has nothing to do with county or county government. It's an international and federal issue. I know Josh knows. He's smiling over there. But we get asked questions all the time, and I think that as I put my hand up and said I'd protect the life liberties of individuals in this county. We have a health department. This is an issue that is pertinent to us as a county, and I would sure hope that as we go down through the discussions with this, that we reaffirm and reflect our community as it looks at this issue, which is continually starting to boil up. And so with that, I'm assuming that there's comment, that there's some comment to this. And if it's okay with the commissioners, we usually take comment first and then discuss it here on the bench and then make a decision. Any comment?
My name is Suzanne Man, and I'm a resident of Utah County. I live in Highland City. And as I was coming here today, I stopped at a light, and I looked at the car next to me, and a gentleman had a binder open, and it had a lot of writing. And in his writing, he had highlighted with a yellow marker some important things in his day that he was going to do, it looked like. And I realized I was wearing a yellow highlighter shirt and that there would be many of us today that would also be wearing a yellow shirt. And to me, it is representative of a yellow highlighter that many of us in college went through our textbooks, highlighting important things and things that we would want to remember. And to me, this resolution is extremely important. And those of us that are here today are just a few of the representatives that also would like this resolution to pass. I wasn't killed as a baby in my mother's womb. She chose life and placed me in a loving home where I was adopted and have lived a great life. And so I'm a real fan of life, and that it is from conception, clear till, natural death. And I hope that we can get the word abortion out of the dictionary, and that is my hope for me being here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rockman, resident of Utah County and resident of Highland. Sorry, your thing's a little bit mucked up here. What's what?
Doesn't tip up like
Name is
just
Rodman.
You're too tall for them.
Yeah.
I am, and you need a adjustable. So I'm going to crouch here. Sorry. I obviously have a vested interest in life. That was my wife. Her mother chose life when it wasn't convenient for her. She had to fly to another state, live with a family. Her mom traveled back and forth. And they didn't necessarily have a lot of money. We've learned a lot of this in the last few years when we found out who she was. So my wife has a sister she never had before, so that's kind of a great thing. But it wasn't convenient. Robert Bork, in his book, Slashing Towards Gomorrah, sorry, I want to bring this up because I want to read it exactly as you wrote. I had a quote about convenience. He's talking about our culture today. He said, "A culture obsessed with technology will come to value personal convenience above almost all else, and ours does. That has consequences we will explore. Among those consequences, however, is impatience with anything that interferes with personal convenience. Religion, morality, and law all do that." Suzanne's mom chose to be inconvenienced. She chose life. I'm blessed as a result. Our 10 grandkids are, or 9.5, and all the people that she served. Now, we also volunteer at the Developmental Center. And in the last year and a half, I have come to value members of our community that are disabled, and disabled severely. And some of us might say, well, their life doesn't have meaning. but it does. I see how it impacts people every day. On Sundays, I see how the kids are learning how to treat other people that are different than them and be kind. I can think back when I was a kid and was not kind to some kids, and it's been 60 years, or no, 50 years, and I still feel guilty. We all probably have done that before. So all life has value, and those people who are disabled are teaching us something. And I see the enjoyment they get out of interacting with other people, so I think their life has value. It's interesting to note that the Hippocratic Oath, which is still used today, some of the earlier forms, going back to 245 BC, specifically forbade abortion and forbade doctors from ending life prematurely with poisons. So this isn't a new concept. It's been around a long time. And it's been a long time, and it's stayed there because it has value. So I would encourage us to acknowledge that life has value and to do those things to help protect that. So thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Marilee Black. I'm a resident of Utah County. I live in Lehigh. I'm also the chairman of the Abortion Free Utah campaign, which was publicly launched last week, where we declared our intention to protect the unborn and eradicate elective abortions of convenience in the state of Utah. There's a long history of cities and counties and states passing resolutions that give voice to the convictions, intentions, concerns, opinions, and passions of their citizens. We feel that this falls squarely in the definition of health and safety for the residents of Utah County. Abortion affects the health and safety of women, babies, and families in our county. Post-abortive women have a 65% higher risk of clinical depression. They're at 6 times greater risk for suicide. Other risks women face are hemorrhage, uterine rupture, tearing of the cervix, heart attack, damage to internal organs, breast cancer, fused or miscarriage, placenta previa, stillbirth and future pregnancies, sterility, anxiety, infection, blood clots, and in some cases, death. For babies involved in abortion, death is nearly 100%. By declaring our county a sanctuary for all human life, including that of the unborn, we hope that you will help women avoid health risks that accompany abortion to expand awareness and involvement of the citizens and save the lives of unborn babies who do represent the future of our community. Some people say that it's the law of the land and there's nothing we can do about it. But courageous people change laws. In fact, there was a day when slavery was the law of the land. And I don't think anyone today would say, too bad, that's the law. This law has been responsible for the murder of millions of innocent babies. And in fact, the latest statistic is over 60 million babies have been aborted. So we hope that you will take the courageous act today, that you will stand firmly for the sanctity of all human life. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Gayle Rosita. I am a citizen here in Utah County. I'm also the president of Utah Eagle Forum, a pro-family, pro-life organization. This has been an issue that has always been very important to us. You know, Eagle Forum is a national organization, and the same within 1 year of Roe versus Wade, we were in existence. I remember long before Roe versus Wade, never thought in my entire life, never dreamed I would live to see the day that it was made legal in this country. You know, by the voice of seven men made that decision that these little babies in the womb could be killed. It was, you know, now everybody lives with that, but try not living with that and then finding yourself faced with it. And I vowed then I would do everything I could for the rest of my life if that's what it took to change that. And so I have tried. I've even been involved when we've passed a law right here in the state of Utah back in 1991 that said that life began at implantation. And that went all the way to the Supreme Court. It actually was heard by the court. And because of one of the justices that had been changed on the way there, it was not upheld. But here we are again, looking at these very laws again, and I am so appreciative of each one of you that you are willing to look at this and decide to stand for life, because family, children, born and unborn, are what we're about here in Utah. That's what we are. We're known for that. And Utah County, isn't that exciting that we here in Utah County, because of, in this case, 3 men sitting there, can vote on this today, and we can send that message. We can send that message to the children who are getting the opposite message in the schools. But we can send a message to families and children that says, we stand for life. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Mary Taylor. I'm the president of Pro-Life Utah. At Pro-Life Utah, much of our efforts and resources are devoted to helping women make a different choice. And that's been one of the most rewarding parts of my job. Often it takes very little to make a very big difference in a woman's decision. Providing this encouragement and assistance means the world to me, because you see, many years ago, I had an abortion because I did not have this kind of help and support. I have paid very deeply with regret and sorrow. The struggles at that time in my life were very temporary. The heartache, it seems, will be permanent. My baby, like millions of others who have been lost to abortion, had a heartbeat, little tiny fingers and toes, and his own DNA and his own unique potential. I wonder how different my life would have been, and that of my unborn babies, if my community had stepped up and declared their support for women in my position. All of those years ago, I was vulnerable to the rhetoric of the abortion clinics, and I let myself be convinced that this was a benign act and an easy solution to my problems. One of the things that made that decision easier for me was that it was legal. In my 19-year-old brain, I rationalized that the government would never, ever sanction something that would put an end to another human being's life. We do look to our government to be a guiding light. This resolution will undoubtedly be a light for many. It will save lives and heartache. Thank you for your courage and your commitment to women and babies in Utah County. Thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Clarence Ott. I am a resident of Utah County and live in Orem. Several weeks ago, we celebrated or remembered D-Day, when many in our nation were involved in preserving the rights and the freedom of many others in the world. D-Day was an example of a place where many Americans gave their lives to save other people, some that they did not even know. Elective abortion takes the lives of others for our own convenience. I believe that the American thing is to give our lives for others, not to take the lives of others for our own convenience. And so I urge the passing of this resolution to recognize the rights of those who are unborn and who need our help. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Robert Van Paris. I come from Park City. I am the Director of Life for the Knights of Columbus. And our organization is very much involved with the sanctity of life from the time of conception through natural death. I thought about what I would want to say here, and everything we've been saying so far has been based upon what is going on today. But as members of this council, of this commission, you have been given a responsibility to protect the people of this county. When your last day on earth is here, and you are standing before God, what do you think your answer will be if when he asked you, did you preserve the life of the unborn child? If you answer, I did, by voting yes today for this resolution, God is going to smile on you. No one ever brings in the fact of God in this problem, but we have forgotten about that. We have forgotten about that specific thing. This is a religious state. There are many different religions in this state, but we all answer to one God. And that God is going to make you and I and everyone in this room answer for what we have done in our lives. So let's have God smile on us today. Let him say, thank you for protecting that unborn child. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Mike Brown, and I am a dad of 5 kids. And if any of you are fathers, which I assume you probably are, you know how precious life is, and that those little babies are more precious than anything. And that truly is what life is all about, is those little children who, no matter how small, they are still a person. And I just want to encourage you to not deny science. Science shows that that is a baby, obviously, in the womb, and it is a developing human. And it's not gonna all of a sudden come out as a stapler or some random object. That no, it's a baby, no matter how small. Doesn't matter how teeny it is. And I find it interesting that my sister-in-law bought my nephew a goldfish or a betta fish last week, and my nephew's only 3, and finding out that it was so much work and a hassle to clean the tank and whatnot, she said, well, let's return this fish. Well, what did she do? She took the time and the effort to pack up the fish, drive out to where she got it, find the right person to talk to return that fish. Now, why would she do that? Because common sense says that, well, that is a life. It's a living thing. That fish is a living thing. She didn't just chuck it down the toilet, or which would be easy to justify for a fish, right? Well, we're talking about human beings. Why on earth would we just flush them down? If we're going to respect life as much for a little fish, or there's a bigger fine if you destroy an eagle egg than if you destroy human life, that obviously doesn't make sense. So let's use common sense and know what life is, and let's protect life, because life is precious. And as a father, I encourage you all to stand up as a dad and have that courage to stand up for life, stand up for those precious babies that we know are living beings that will develop into humans, and they won't develop into some random object. Let's use common sense and protect all life, because that's really what this is about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Kristofferson. I'm a state representative that represents North Utah County, and I live in Lehigh. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak and for your efforts in protecting life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And a lot of people don't understand what life means. I believe that life starts at conception. And I appreciate that you recognize that and that you're bringing this forward. And as I've thought about the importance of undeveloped life, I had the same thought as the previous speaker, you know. I mean, think of the trouble you'd get if you removed an egg from an eagle nest and the kind of stir that would cause. And so people recognize that. But I also appreciate the fact that there are options to abortion, that there are many people who would like to care for that child. And my daughter is in the final stages of her adoption procedures for her second baby that she's adopted, and it's brought a lot of happiness and joy into her life, and I appreciate the woman who made that decision not to abort those babies, to give them life and allow them to have a good life and bless the lives of others. So thank you for bringing this resolution to us. Appreciate it.
Yes. Hey, Dave. Dave? Dave?
Hi there, my name is Crystal Meldrum, and I'm the oldest of 11 children, and I'm coming representing them and also my family. We did the Utah County Journal newspaper for 26 years in Utah County, and all my uncles, the Oldhams, and my dad, Jeff and Margaret Cooper, they all wanted us to represent ourselves here today to tell you that we support the unborn life. And I talked to my 12-year-old son on the way here about what I should say, and he said, well, tell them you don't know. One of those children could turn out to be an engineer or Thomas Edison. We need to protect these lives and give people tools. And thank you so much for listening.
Good morning. My name is Amy Jo Young. I live in Lehigh. I am really grateful for this resolution coming forward. I want to speak in behalf of the unborn that cannot speak for themselves. We don't kill a child because they are simply an infant or a toddler. And yet we think of killing them when they're a zygote or an embryo. That is just a process of their development. They are a human being from the very time that conception happens. They have an individual DNA, and they are an individual person. I want to protect them. And as much as I want to protect them, I also want to protect their mothers. Those who say they are pro-choice. There are so many women who get abortions out of fear. Most of them have abortions out of fear because, like was said, they don't have that support system. Or they think that surely laws wouldn't be passed that aren't good. What these women are told is that it is just a sack of tissue. They're told that by the same people in Planned Parenthood and other organizations that would take those sacks of tissues and reassemble actual body parts of a human being. They are not talked to about options that they have. They are the only success that this abortion clinic has is when it ends in a death of a baby. That woman will struggle for the rest of her life. I'm really grateful that we still do the Pledge of Allegiance in our country. We say one nation under God. I believe in God, and I believe that these are His children that we are here talking to protect. I believe that you cannot kill a child of God without great emotional and spiritual pain. I'm grateful to you for bringing forth this resolution. Please pass it.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Christiana Finney, and I am a resident of Orem. So I was pregnant at 15 in Utah County, and when we talk about options, it's very interesting because I'm curious as to know who in this room knows the option of a pregnant kid or a pregnant woman who's not white, middle class, well off, has a support system. It's a real thing, okay? I birthed that child. I recently had a discussion with him on why I am pro-abortion. Not just pro-choice, but it is pro-abortion, because options are important for people who have other circumstances than the norm of what people have grown up with. I have been a sexual assault, domestic violence advocate for 10 years. And let me tell you that reproduction is used as a part of abuse, because when a woman is reliant on their abuser, it makes it very difficult for them to leave a very seriously threatening, fatalistic outcome relationship. So when we talk about options, options are important for women to have. And I hear everybody's poor little babies and unborn and, oh, their rights. Well, what about the women's rights who are already citizens here? We have an obligation to protect everybody. And that includes women who their options are extremely limited. Okay? I chose adoption because I had resources that helped me make it in a way that I can live with myself. You talk about women's pain when they kill their babies. Okay, pain of adoption is real as well. These unborn babies are not a thing. It's not about protecting the defenseless. You need to protect the vulnerable women of this community. We've been here before as a nation where abortion was illegal. Look at that history. Look at what that led to. We really want to do this? Thank you.
My name is Miriam Christensen. I am the chair of Citizens for Strong Families. And there's a few points I'd like to make that I haven't heard others touch on. In response to the woman that just spoke, this resolution has the exceptions of rape and incest in it to protect those women in those kinds of cases. What the resolution is obviously opposing is elective abortions, those that are done for convenience more. Others have spoken about the harm to women when they have an abortion, the physical, psychological, emotional, mental harms, and those harms are real, and the heartache lasts for a long time, if not forever. I want to address a different kind of heartache, and others have touched on this, and it's the heartache of a childless family. So our position is that a man and a woman, they make a commitment, and that makes a marriage, but a family doesn't really start until they're able to have children. Many families are able to have children on their own, and others can't have children on their own. In the abortion society, the abortion mentality that was created by Roe versus Wade, it has made the heartache of being childless last longer for families who would love to adopt children. I appreciate the number 4 in the resolution that supports making adoption easier for families as an alternative to abortion. I also wanted to mention the talk about euthanasia in the resolution. Most people in Utah don't realize that the state legislature has considered euthanasia, doctor-assisted suicide laws, the last several years. And it's going to keep coming back, and they try and make soften the opposition to doctor-assisted suicide, and calling it mercy killings or whatever. And we feel that euthanasia is such a big problem for a family-oriented society. We become strong families when we help each other through all of our circumstances, good and bad. And giving that loving, compassionate service to our family members who are sick and dying is an important part of what makes strong families. So we appreciate those provisions as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Alexis Wollen. I've lived in Provo for the past 5 years, and I've had the pleasure of working with Pro-Life Utah for the past year. And what I've seen as I've worked with this group is just an incredible love and rallying around women in these vulnerable positions. not just the group, but the entire community. And this resolution is a chance for our county to be an example to other counties, to show that we protect the unborn, we stand for their lives, and we do rally around these women. I've seen the community throw baby showers, collect diapers, get clothes for these unborn children, for these women in vulnerable positions. And this is a chance for us to be that example to other counties. I encourage you to pass this resolution so that we can show that we do value all human lives here in Utah County. Thank you.
My name is Deanna Holland, and I'm the Vice President of Pro-Life Utah and also a resident of Utah County. I live in Highland. For too long, we have sat on the sidelines thinking that there was nothing we could do about abortion. We were told that it's a constitutional right and that women need it. For 46 years, we were told that we had to sit back and do nothing while women were used and babies died in our state. And we believed that. So we put abortion in the back of our minds and went about our lives. We knew it was wrong, but relegated it to the can't do anything about it category. That was a lie, and we should not have listened. Our society is finally waking up. In 1973, we were told that an abortion simply got rid of a clump of cells, and then the invention of the ultrasound machine. Little by little, we realized the truth. Even now, scientists are learning about how unborn babies can recognize their mother's voice, how pain may be able to be felt as early as 8 weeks. Doctors perform fetal surgery on babies the same age as those that are being aborted. These are tiny children with beating hearts, livers, lungs, brain waves, kidneys, and little tiny hands and feet. The old talking points ring hollow, and the abortion lobby knows it. So the arguments had to change. We now hear on a daily basis that yes, it's biologically human, but it's not yet a human being. That it's pregnancy tissue. That it's not a person because it's not sentient. That it's not really a baby until it takes its first breath. That even if it was a human inside of her, a woman should not be forced to remain pregnant. That it's not a child, but a utero-potential individual, in the words of Utah Representative King. You see, it's actually very hard to describe unborn children in a way that does not humanize them. These are not potential humans, they are humans. And what about their mothers? Is abortion truly empowering, as we've been told? Most Utah women getting an abortion are scared and alone. They seek out abortion because they feel disempowered, and society has told them that abortion's the solution for their situation. Unmarried, get an abortion. Young, in college, financially unstable, abortion is the quick fix solution to that. I personally have stood outside the abortion clinic in Salt Lake County. I see them come out. They are not empowered. They are broken. Today, we break away from the shackles of falsehoods and fear. We start to turn our culture in a better direction, to say that we will not silently accept the death of Utah's innocent any longer, that we can do better, that we can help women in ways that don't end in lifelong regret for her and the death of her baby. So it's with hope that I am here today and gratitude to see our county stand up for life, to act, to educate, to reach out in love. Today, I'm proud to be a citizen of Utah County. Please vote yes.
My name is Karen Varner. I live in Orem. I'm a Utah County resident. When I was a little girl, my mother took foster babies. She took them between the time when the mother gave the child up before it was given to the family, during that interim time when the mother could change her mind and take the child back. We took about 13 children a year. When abortion was legalized in Rochester, New York, they laid off between 25 and 35 mothers. They didn't need them. Utah and South Dakota are the only two states in the United States that have a birth rate large enough to repopulate itself. These are our citizens. These are our future citizens. Abortion, the killing of a child, should not be an option. Not be an option. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Barbara Brewer. I'm a resident of American Fork. And I just want to let you know why I'm in support of this resolution. We had one woman so far who said she was pro-abortion, and she seemed to be concerned about what options are available to women in crisis pregnancies. Well, for the past about year or so, I've spent several hours out in front of the abortion clinics offering help and resources to these gals and women who are going in there to kill their unborn children. I brought a visual aid. This is a blessing bag that we sometimes hand out to these gals going into the clinic. In here is a pamphlet with an address of the Pregnancy Resource Center where they can go for help and resources. A few months ago, a couple of our advocates were out on the sidewalk and a gal went into the Planned Parenthood in Salt Lake suspecting that she may be pregnant. Apparently she was turned away because she needed to go to their other clinic for a verified pregnancy test or something like that. And one of our advocates was able to take her to the Pregnancy Resource Center and get her in. So she had an ultrasound after her pregnancy was confirmed. And as soon as she saw that ultrasound with her baby's heartbeat, she immediately changed her mind and realized that that was a life. And before that, she was totally convinced that abortion was the best choice for her. And that gal just gave birth a few days ago to a sweet, beautiful little girl. And I want everyone who may be in a difficult circumstance, such as this woman, to realize that there are help and resources out there available, and so much love. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michael, and the reason I came here today is that I believe that every person is created in the image and likeness of God from conception till natural death. And I believe we need to stand up for the rights of those people, and we need to stand up for the rights of the people that are voiceless and can't speak for themselves. So we heard earlier many good things, but one thing we heard is, what about we heard about the rights of women, and what I say to that is, what about the rights of the young women who don't have a right to speak for themselves, who are in the womb? These people need somebody to stand up and defend themselves. We look at statistics, and somebody mentioned that there are 60 million people have been killed since Roe v. Wade, and this is something that doesn't get talked about enough and needs to get spoken about, and people need to know about. It's about each and every individual person. It's about standing up and defending each person, because each person has a dignity and each person has a right to life above all else and before all else. And that's why I came here today.
Thank you.
Council members, thank you for your time. My name is Roger Brown. I live in Linden. And the reason I decided to come up and stand before you was to question the idea that a mother has the authority to end the life of what's growing within her. Roe v. Wade believes that she does have that authority. And that is the real question. Does she have that authority to do that? Was she alone in the decision of what created that inside? And she wasn't, obviously. So it's actually two people who were involved in that decision. So the question is, are those two authorized to make the decision to end this life that's growing inside the one woman. And that's something I question also. It is my belief, and the reason why I came up here to stand before you, is that those two individuals decided their position at the moment that they decided to be sexually together. And at that point, that decision, the two of them made, and they actually committed and submitted themselves to the processes that might happen. And so technically the two are accountable for that birth, but they've given that up to the processes that would follow. So I question that the mother has that authority. I question that the father, the paternal father, biological father, also has that authority. I actually believe they've given it up. So my final point is that in your roles, I think it's very important, without being religious or making the moral statements that you might not be allowed to make the statements that the responsibility that comes with sexual intercourse and sexual reproduction, and to make the statements in your laws that state, men, women out there, if you engage in sexual intercourse, you are making the decision that this process that might come from that is going to happen, and that we as a people must submit to that and not believe that we have the authority to end it. And so I just want us to look at the possibility that how did we get here, and the way we get here is a man and woman have sexual intercourse, and the process of germination begins, and that all happens. So we really have to go upstream, and I think it might be even your responsibility, and you could take this responsibility of informing the stand that men and women out there, if you engage in sexual intercourse here in this county, you've made your decision, and we as a county must submit to that decision, that the processes that follow are out of our hands. And so this is my long way of saying I don't believe we have the authority to abort, and I don't believe we should take any position that sustains that. I just don't believe in it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Vicki Pope. I'm a resident of Cedar Hills. I've met all of you individually as a county delegate and have voted for all of you. I am thankful that you are considering this resolution today in favor of the sanctity of life, and I hope that you will vote yes for it. Just a couple of things. I am pro-choice in that I believe a woman has the right to choose whether and with whom to have sexual relations. Once we make a choice, we don't get to choose all the consequences, and sometimes the consequence of that choice is a pregnancy. I very recently was introduced to the pro-life group and am aware of this meeting because of an email I received from them, and I appreciate all that they desire to do on behalf of women who are in a very difficult situation. My own mother, at 19, found herself pregnant, and as an unmarried woman had decisions to make. This was a long time ago. I am told, I can't confirm, that my grandmother encouraged her to have an abortion. And she chose not to, and I'm very grateful for that choice, and I haven't really appreciated what a difficult situation she was in. But I am so grateful that she chose life for me. I know that a resolution on behalf of a county commission does not change any laws. on a county, state, or national basis. I'm generally a non-confrontational person, and I don't involve myself in a lot of causes, but I felt like I needed to stand up and speak up for unborn, for all life, all human life. And I believe this resolution is a way for you to represent the vast majority of your county constituency in doing the same, to say that we stand together for the rights of all human life within our county. We're not changing any laws, but we're standing up and speaking up for what we believe. I hope that you will vote yes on this resolution, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, any others? One more?
This is a subject that is very near and dear to my heart. About 20 years ago, I found myself in need of an abortion. I am very grateful that at no time was whether or not it was a legal procedure, whether or not it was a safe procedure, was brought up. I have lived with the guilt and the shame of being an unwed, pregnant woman. Please vote for the rights of women to make the choice. Nobody is saying that adoption is not a viable option. It absolutely is a viable option. For some women, in circumstances where they are supported, however, the right to terminate that pregnancy and to live the life, their life, is also an option, and it should remain an option. We've talked about over 60 million babies have been aborted and blamed those abortions all on the women. That means there are over 60 million men who participated in the making of an unwanted child. That man has no consequences. His body doesn't change. He doesn't deal with this shame in the same way that a woman is forced to. Life is sacred. And just because you're alive doesn't mean that you have a good quality of life. And everybody who is born and who has the right to make a choice should be given the option to make that choice. There are many things that can be done to lower the rate of abortion. It is not the first thing. I do not know of any woman who would have chosen that path. But given where their situation led them, that's a choice that they made. And I am grateful that I had the opportunity to make that choice. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, seeing no others, we'll take it up here to the bench for discussion if needed. Any thoughts? Maybe I'll start off with this. I like history because I think history at times repeats itself. and we see if we don't learn from it, then we deal with it again and again. And I truly believe in looking at great societies, that you can mark great societies by how they treat the elderly and the very young. And everywhere that I've researched and looked at societies who do not treat those two classes of people have some serious problems within their societal era. Somebody brought up the one with slavery, and I think that's very pertinent, because I had an individual call me. I don't know if he's here or not. He said he was going to try to make it here, but he talked about slavery too. And yeah, it used to be the law of the land. There was economics tied to it. There was a lot of things that were tied to slavery, and we look back at that now and we think, that is, how could they ever think like that? And so, yes, this is a resolution. It's not a law. I mean, it doesn't have the force of law behind it. But I can tell you now, if I had the ability to do something that had a little bit more of the force of law, I would. But I can't. But if I can't stand up now, who will? And if it's not now, when? And I was elected to represent this county, and I think I'm trying to represent this county all the way through. This resolution, in my opinion, touches on all life, all the way through. We heard some here talking about, circumstances, they're horrendous, and believe me, they're horrendous. I have 7 children. I have seen the process where we've had miscarriages. I've seen the processes where we've had tubal pregnancies. I know what that's like. I know the pain that comes from those as well. I've seen that end of it. It doesn't compare to some of the other choices that people have to make. I get that. But for me, this resolution is put forward to reaffirm human life. And I want to be one that stands always and says, yes, I'm standing for life and for human life and all life. Doesn't matter, quality of life to me if they're mentally handicapped. I've been there too, Mayor. I've been there at the developmental center. I've seen it. They are great people, wonderful people, and I stand with them as well in their life's journey. It's different than mine. And we all stand in little different paths in journeys. So obviously I am a yes on this resolution, and I would hope that my fellow commissioners would feel the same.
I guess just a couple of comments. One, I'm overwhelmed positively with those who've come to speak in favor of this. The remarks were moving, and for me, this is an incredibly complex issue, right? That encompasses faith, the law, medicine, science. Even we've heard topics of demographics and psychology, and all inform policies on this issue. And we've also heard some pretty grueling personal experiences that also inform people's opinions and views on this. Perhaps I'll just share a little bit of my own experience that is why I would support this resolution. Heidi and I have been married for 14 years, and we have 5 children. A lot of you know that. We also have had the experience of having miscarriage, and I think that those life-changing experiences of going to the doctor's office and seeing your child's heartbeat is incredible. And I think that we had perhaps even more anxiety in that process when you have experienced a miscarriage, and so you're nervous to see if that heartbeat's still there. And one of those experiences came when we actually went to the doctor's office. Heidi was concerned that she was miscarrying again, and we already had 2 children at this point, and we went in, and she was incredibly anxious, and we were in the emergency room and were attended to by a couple of residents at the hospital when they began to do an ultrasound, and sure enough saw that little flicker of a heartbeat. And Heidi was overwhelmed with tears of joy at that moment. And then she looked at my face and she was kind of like, what's going on? why are you not happy? And I'm like, I'm happy, but hold on here. And I told the doctor, keep moving that ultrasound around. They're like, what are you talking about? I said, I think I saw something else. And they kept moving it, and sure enough, there was another flicker. And so in that moment, we found out that we were having twins. And I've got to say, there was never been a more, a moment of more deep motivation where I came closer to the very purpose of existence than right then and there. And the motivation to just do everything to protect and defend those little heartbeats, which turned out to be my twin daughters. And so for me, I just can't ever imagine. I can't ever imagine the desire to electively terminate a life. Moving to the legal obligations, it was stated that we have the obligation to protect everyone. And I actually believe that entirely. We took an oath of office, and I take that as a sacred responsibility. And part of that oath of office is protecting the unborn. So regardless of my personal feelings, I feel like it's my legal obligation. You know, in fact, the Roe v. Wade has been referenced, and in a critical way, but referencing as, you know, a case which legalized certain abortion procedures at certain times. But even that case acknowledges that the government, the Supreme Court acknowledges the government has an interest in the life of the unborn. And it really more hinged on the balancing of those rights and interests of the mother and the life of the unborn. And the sad part about today's rhetoric that we're experiencing in today's politics is that people are even forgetting that at all, suggesting that the government does not have any interest in the life of the unborn, which is just not true. We have an obligation to do so. And so I'm happy to stand in support of this resolution today, and I thank all of those who came to express their support.
Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you so much to each of you for coming today and for expressing your opinions and your thoughts and sharing your stories. It's always a great reminder of the great experiment of America's working when we can have these type of discussions and these important discussions that center around the responsibility of government to protect individual rights and liberty. And in this particular case, as Commissioner Ainge so eloquently mentioned, from a legal standpoint, that's our responsibility as lawmakers, is to protect those individual rights and liberties of all. Now, on a personal note, I had the opportunity this weekend to get away for a few days and go to Yellowstone. And this is a special time of year at the park because the little buffalo are running around, the little red dogs, and the calf elk are starting to be born. And when you sit there with your camera and in the peace of nature and you watch those beautiful animals run, it's such a reminder of the happiness of youth and childhood and the hope that's born with each generation. And I had the opportunity to capture those and to see that happiness of life and to come home and share some of those pictures with my mother. My mother's with us today because her biological mom had the courage and the desire for her to live. And so she placed her in a loving home with beautiful parents. Mrs. Mann's comments certainly touched my heart because it's a story similar to my own. And ironically, as we were driving home, one of my really good friends, Philip and his husband, they posted a picture of their new son that they'd just adopted. And it was a reminder again that there are wonderful people and families in this world who are anxious and eager to help, to love, and to cherish and raise life when given the opportunity. And I think we have a great responsibility to make sure that we protect that individual right of those unborn, and that we make sure that our laws are cohesive and open so that those people and those individuals who have a great desire to care for and love and nurture and raise these children have that opportunity so that they can grow up in an environment where they're nurtured and cared for, where they can grow and develop and become productive citizens. And so it's very easy for me to support this because my whole life I've been someone who's valued life because it's what I was taught to do. And I was also taught that the greatest responsibility of government is to protect those individual rights, especially the rights of minority or the individual, the greatest minority there is. And so I'm happy to join with my fellow commissioners in supporting this and again, the testimonies today that have been offered from so many of you in support of this. It's great to have the opportunity to set aside differences from time to time and work together hand in hand on things that we agree with. And I think that's a critical component as well, that we recognize we have that capacity. And so thank you for your testimony and the things that you've shared today. And again, it's grateful to work with my fellow commissioners as we continue to fight for those individuals.
Thank you, and I want to thank my fellow commissioners as well. When you start a process like this, you may know and you may not know, we don't have an opportunity to actually talk about this stuff, and so there are times. I had faith in them, believe me. I thought that, it's gonna go forward, but there's always this little bit of doubt. Doubt always comes in too, wondering. And so I wanted to, it seems to me like this is gonna pass with 3-0. We'll have to go through the formal motion to make sure that happens, but still, mark this day in Utah County, that the commissioners in Utah County are standing for all human life. And thank goodness that, that we go forward in such a manner and keep telling the story. But also remember that this decision and the decisions that go forward on this are tough. They're hard. They're not easy. These are the things that really tear, into the fabric of our lives and tear into the fabric of who we are as individuals. And I think we need to be sensitive all the way across the board with it as much as possible. But I still think that we need to stand firm. And so, thank you for being here. A motion would be in order.
I move that we, pursuant to regular agenda item number 1, adopt a resolution declaring Utah County's support for protecting all human life.
Second.
I got a motion and a second to adopt the resolution as stated in regular agenda item number 1. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. Okay, I put this on our agenda first for a reason, because we've got a lot of really interesting business that's coming up, but I figured that there was probably a lot that would like to leave and do other things with their day as well. Thank you for coming. Hopefully you signed the roll in the back as you came in. We'll just take a small break.
Good, thank you. Oh, thank you, Mr. Man. You betcha.
So I was just talking to him about that. I'm trying to see. I was
No, I'm
literally
good
just
with that.
getting his opinion on that.
Oh, you betcha.
Okay, we're gonna move you out. Okay, because I knew. Okay, great.
It's a great place.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Oh, I gotta tell you something.
Oh, nice. Wait, really?
I did, yes. Follow-up would be great.
Love it.
Oh, Brian's sick today. I wonder if Chris could help you with that. I just want to make sure that we post it. Yeah, it doesn't have the draft. That's a good point. Hey, Chris. Chris.
Yeah, you betcha.
Send it. Yeah. And yours. Okay. Hey, Gene. Hey, Gene. Are you still fine for being here for a while? Yeah. Okay. I just want to. We're going to move the agenda around a little bit to give one of the presenters to go first. We've got a lot of presentations. Okay, you're good? Okay, I just wanted to make sure you were fine. Okay, we're going to move the rest of our meeting. So if you could, as quickly as possible, maybe move out into the hall, that would be great. That'd be helpful for us anyway. There has been an ask that we move our work session item, agenda item number 1 up for reasons of just time. And so if we're okay with that, commissioners, formally?
Yep.
Okay. We will come on up and do your presentation.
Actually, is this separate than regular agenda item number 2?
It's a different agency.
It's different agency.
Oh.
Yeah.
Great.
Same purpose.
Yeah.
So just as a way of introduction, especially because I don't actually think I've met you, Commissioner Ainge, but my name is Brianna and I supervise our victim advocate program with the Utah County Sheriff's Office. And we're primarily funded through VOCA, which is a federal funding source for victims. And part of that requirement is for us to just provide an update to you guys. And so I just have some statistical numbers for you to just show the success that our program has had this past year. We have actually grown to 3 full-time advocates, including myself, as well as a part-time Spanish-speaking victim advocate. This past year, we secured a contract with Salem Police Department to also provide services to that city, as well as Santa Quin Police Department. So we've been doing really well in collaborating with those agencies and providing more services to those communities, specifically in those cities. In total, our program served 860 victims of crime this past year. That includes all the family of those who have died either from suicide, overdoses, or accidental deaths. And our biggest category of victim serves is domestic violence, and we served 447 primary and secondary victims of domestic violence. The second largest category was child sexual abuse, and we served 181 primary and secondary victims within that category as well. And we provided 8,621 services to those victims of crime. So the numbers just show how many victims we're serving, as well as being able to provide quality services and a great number of services to those victims. Just as a kind of case review that I think best illustrates the work that our Special Victims Task Force is doing involved a case where a man, he was 33 years of age at the time, and he sexually abused his girlfriend's daughter and several of her friends. And he was already, he had failed to register as a sex offender, but was required to do so, so he was already on the registry. And our program was able to rally around those victims and really help support them be able to provide.
Hold on, we have to keep the door open, please. Thank you.
We provided a number of services to help them get connected with resources. We also helped relocate. We went to a home of one of the victims, helped pack them up, and had them relocated to a different location to help them be able to best heal from this. And because of the support that the victims received in this case, not only from our victim advocate program, but from our detectives that work on our special victim crimes, as well as the county attorney's office, we were able to have this case quickly resolved. And the victims stood up and provided very compelling victim impact statements that actually allowed for the judge in the case to steer away from a stipulated agreement that the prosecutor's office as well as the defense had made as a resolution for this. And this man has now been sentenced to prison, and he will be 102 years old by the time he's actually eligible for parole. So I feel like this is one of the biggest cases that we had this past year that I think best illustrates, again, the collaboration that and the difference that can be made when all moving parts, advocates, law enforcement, and prosecution can work well together. And I really believe that that case alone, we really protected our community and got a really dangerous and sadistic man off of the streets. So that was just one case to illustrate that. I won't take much more of your time. I don't know if you have any questions for me.
Same question I ask every year. And thank you first, for the great work that you do. It's needed it's needed more and more in our community, which is kind of a sad note.
Yeah.
But thank you for the work that you do. Tell me trends, because I ask that every year. Do you see it still increasing? Do you see some decreasing? Do you see some hope on the horizon that way, or what are we going as the years go by?
I mean, I always hope that there's going to be a greater hope in our community, but crime is definitely up. Not only is it up, but I personally feel like we have seen more violence in the type of cases that we're actually working now. So for instance, like our domestic violence cases, we're seeing more strangulations incorporated within our domestic violence cases, and now even as part of some of our sexual abuse and sexual assault cases. So not only would I say that crime is definitely rising, but the level of violence that's part of these crimes is also escalating immensely, unfortunately. But yeah, I know for the sheriff's office at least, we're incredibly busy. I mean, we're having to pull cases every day now, in addition to being called out, and we're averaging anywhere between 50 to 70 cases, calls for service a day. And that's, a day, not necessarily cases that work with victims, but our law enforcement officers are responding to that many calls a day. Then as advocates, we go through to make sure that we can try to identify victims within those. This is for the cases that the sheriff's office alone, just the sheriff's office. So there's a lot of calls for service every day. So that it just shows that more people are reporting as well, which is a really good thing that allows for us to not only get involved, but and help them be able to get and identify resources. But it just shows the need that our sheriff's office has to also receive more support to be able to better provide protection for our community. So, do you have any other questions?
Just thank you so much for your work, and it's incredible what you guys do. And again, it's sad you have to do it, but thank you so much for what you do.
Have a good day.
All right. We'll go back now to, we held for presentation agenda item number 2, which is a presentation on the VOCA grant. Sounds similar, but it's, I don't see her here. Okay, let's just hold that.
Want to hold it or
We'll ho-
continue?
Why don't we hold it? Was she here earlier? Did anybody see her here earlier? Well, how
hold
about
it for
how
now.
about we just
We can
hold it in
continue
case
it, yeah.
in case she shows up. She's maybe watching it right now from her office and frantically trying to get down here. So if we could just,
I'll move that we table regular agenda item number 2.
fair enough, thank you.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to table agenda item number 2. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's tabled right now. We'll move to items number 3, and I think we can do 3 and 4 together. So come on up and we'll, for a presentation on items number 3 and 4. And 3 and 4 is to consider an adoption of a resolution authorizing the issuance of a sale of the more than $35 million, and also the second one is to the $22 million in principal amounts and so forth. So go ahead.
Thank you. Commissioners, great to be here. I'm Matt Dugdale with George K. Baum and Company, financial advisor to the county. And this is Randy Larson, bond counsel to the county with Gilmore Bell. I'll cover briefly, if that's all right, just maybe the financial background snapshot, and Randy can go through the resolutions. But certainly happy to answer any questions along the way. The reason for these resolutions being on the agenda, we've really seen what we call a rally in the municipal bond market. The county was very successful earlier this year in February in refunding some bonds that generated some significant savings. And
You gotta tell us how much, don't hide that.
Absolutely.
It's like $6 million.
Yeah, so if you turn to page 10 on the little presentation booklet, this summarizes the savings. On a gross basis, we look at savings on a gross basis as well as we bring those back to today's dollars. So on a gross basis through now and 2034, those savings equate to $10.6 million, and those are directly the transportation sales tax, Part 2218, Part 2216 taxes. So those additional dollars can go towards other projects or what have you. In present value, those dollars were $6.8 million, so really a great savings for the county. And so the county has 2 other bonds that we've been monitoring and our models have flagged with the recent rally in the marketplace. Page 5, again, the problem with getting a bond person up is we can talk forever about the marketplace, but page 5 kind of tells the story that this is our yield curve, our benchmark yield curve for the municipal bond market. And the coloring is a little hard to decipher, but that lower curve in purple represents where rates are today, these benchmark rates. And you can see how they compare relative to a year ago, even 6 months ago. And rates have come down, and this has been a product of some of the international turmoil that we've been seeing, bond supply and other things really work on the marketplace. But rates have been low, and that's what's flagged these, again, in our models to potentially deliver some good savings to the county. There was some flexibility built in to these bonds that enable us to refund those at any time. And I think we can strategically work together to decipher when that time will be. The resolution basically provides for that first statutory step and then gets us through some contest period so that we can have flexibility when we really want to pull the trigger. And Randy can speak to that. But today I've summarized the savings on pages 11, 12, and 13. We have a lot of options. We can structure these however you would like. But there's some savings to be had. Again, on the 2009B vehicle registration fee bonds, these are bonds that were part of that basket of bonds issued back in 2009 and 10 for some of the transportation projects in the county, Geneva Road, Pioneer Crossing, part of the I-15 core. And today we can, if we were issuing bonds today, I would estimate on a gross basis we could save just over $3 million and present value about 2.5. The convention center bonds also have the potential for savings, and those bonds were unique, as well as the vehicle registration fee bonds in 2009 as part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And this is very exciting. But there was a vehicle created called the Build America Bond where we issued actually taxable bonds, and then the Treasury sends the county a check, every 6 months, a 35% subsidy on the vehicle registration fee bonds to lower that interest cost for the county. And it happens contemporaneously. County pays, and then you get that subsidy back from the Treasury. So your net cost is very low. On the convention center bonds, we receive a 45% subsidy. But even with those subsidies, today we can refund and for those savings. So that's the backdrop, and the genesis for this is really to get through that 30-day contest period, and then again work collectively on timing and procedure, when to pull the trigger. The call date is in December, so we really have some good flexibility. We could refund after the call date. The question then is, where will rates be? Will they be higher or lower? Conditions are good right now. I think they'll even improve over the next couple months. The Fed has signaled some rate decreases that could come in at the end of July, at least for the short end of the yield curve. So that's a financial snapshot. Happy to answer any questions. One thing I do want to note, though, is, and just really want to let the public know that the county's been very proactive in managing its debt. You have a really tremendous debt portfolio. As and Commissioner Ainge has commissioned me to work with Dave and Deneen on just looking at how we compare to AAA-rated counties. Before I am no longer the county's advisor or leave this earth, Utah County will be a AAA-rated county. And so in that effort, looking at ways that we can fine-tune some things, implement some policies and procedures that perhaps were flagged in this last refunding that we did in January, and tighten the ship a little bit, and appreciate that, Commissioner, for that initiative. And but as I look and compare Utah County with other counties, your debt ratios are very low. You have a very low debt burden. You don't have any property tax-backed debt, which is very unique. There are some measures that we can improve on, including a more robust capital improvement plan, and recommending some reserve policies. And but regardless, the county was upgraded last week on the convention center bonds. They were originally issued at a AA- rating, which is a great rating. But last week, the county received an upgraded AA+. Again, a signal to the county's strength and progress it's making, as well as the bonds issued in 2013 on the TRT revenue stream for the museum at Thanksgiving Point. AA- upgraded to AA. So congratulations to you on that. And very, very good measure. But happy to answer any financial questions. If you'd like, I can defer to Randy to speak procedurally on the
Thank you, Matt.
resolutions.
I find it interesting. I applaud you trying to get us to that AAA, but there are some circumstances with college students and so forth that are pretty hard for us to overcome until, population changes just a little bit more in a different direction.
Yes.
Which we'll see how that works, but we know that plays against us. Nothing that we can necessarily do. We just deal with it.
Right. Yep.
Also, I just wanted to mention on this, although a vote for this, for these two, doesn't mean a lock-in.
Right.
It starts a 30-day process for us to receive any opposition if somebody wants to challenge it. And so it doesn't say that we're locked in at any rate. We can pull the trigger or not. This is, to me, as I look down through it, it gives us the opportunity to be nimble and flexible on the what if.
Yes.
What if in the future, after the 30 days, we see an opportunity that makes sense to us, and then we can pull that trigger or not.
Right. We have flexibility, timing. We can work together strategically. You tell me the timing that you would prefer. I'll continually update you on where rates are and what they're projected to be, so we can make that decision at that time. This resolution, not to take Randy's comments, but this resolution creates kind of a box of acceptability. As long as the rates and term fall within this parameter, then we can pull that trigger and have that flexibility. The goal here would be to keep the bonds within the current footprint, not extend the debt, but keep it within the footprint, or we could even shorten the term as well. So, right, have that flexibility. But
Can I just follow up on that procedurally? Maybe that is you, Randy. I just want to confirm Commissioner Lee's point that this is really like a minimum requirement of 30 days notice in order to us to start that clock. But really, if we were to decide not to pull the trigger, so for example, would this resolution be sufficient should we decide to wait another 9-10 months before acting?
Randy Larson, bond counsel to the county. You're exactly right. There's nothing statutorily that would say when this resolution expires. I typically would recommend if you went beyond a year that we propose coming back to the commission just to make sure that you had a unanimous support. But you're exactly right. There's nothing binding about this. Even the 30 days is just a contestability period for the assistance of the new bondholders to know there can't be a legal challenge to the procedures. But it is not binding. You haven't incurred any expense from us. We're here to do it. Should the numbers and the refunding work at your discretion. The savings numbers that Matt has described are net of any cost of issuance. So there's very little, as your counsel, risk, if you will, to adopting this resolution to be prepared should rates move in a manner favorable to you to trigger the most amount of savings in consultation with your financial advisor.
Thank you. A couple of follow-ups that I might have, Matt, about some of your points that you made. Sometimes I just look at this a little bit more holistically, and I like to listen to Dave Ramsey. He's not the most sophisticated finance. If everyone followed that, you might not have a job here as our advisor. But, it does seem like in terms of a refinancing of someone's mortgage, this really is an opportunity to have a mortgage payment of $1,500 be reduced to about $1,000 a month. So in that regard, it kind of seems like a no-brainer. My only caution has been, as we've looked at these, to make sure that we're not, if you're a household, continuing that example, and your spending is out of whack and you're unemployed, and right, sometimes you got to fix the most important things first. And while it's not really an either or here, we can do everything. There is some distraction value for our internal team as we go through this. And so I'm supportive of this. I'm supportive of this resolution. But in the vein of making sure we have our house in order, can you maybe speak to a couple of those other things that you noted that, you noted the good things that we have relative to other counties? We've been upgraded. We have a low debt ratio. Where do we have some red flags that we need to put our financial house in order in?
Yeah. One thing a few things that were flagged, and again, flagged not being a negative thing, but noted by the rating agencies as we went through the last process, was the county does not have a formal debt policy in place. Mm-hmm. We have a draft that we've worked with Dave on. I think that it would be useful to implement that, and certainly in consultation with you, to have that formal debt policy in place, and that helps set precedents. It helps really with things like this, that if a refunding or you receive refunding pitches from other entities, that, well, if the county doesn't meet this threshold in savings as a percentage of the outstanding par amount, we won't even think about doing it. So I think that would be one. Another thing that was also noted was a more extensive capital plan with major county capital facilities. I know that there's need for new county building in the future, and other things, and I think that would be well to get that underway. Also,
Can I just make one clarifying point on that? Correct me if my understanding is right on this. The issue with the capital plan is that sometimes you can look at a budget and you can see the revenue coming in and the expenses, and you can see whether that's balanced, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're, and so it can give an illusion that everything's great. But if you don't include where you're at in a capital plan, there's essentially a whole bunch of hidden liabilities that are there, right? For example, if the county is 10 years behind in the building program, then really that's not showing up on the balance sheet as debt, but that could be an obligation that, wow, the county actually has to spend millions of dollars to construct some new office space to house the employees. And that's the risk, right? Right. There's a transparency element there of let's put everything that we know we need out there so that the financials are kind of clear with our obligations. Is that a fair kind of description of why S&P or Moody's might care about this?
Absolutely. One of the concerns now that's out there, and that's not only with county governments, but with water and sewer and on the city side, is we have aging facilities in the state. And where there's been provision to, say, fund depreciation, build up those reserves to replace these projects, that really makes the picture brighter. And I think, as you speak to transparency, certainly having a balanced budget and all these things are meritorious, but looking further than the next year or 2 years or 3 years down the road, what facilities does the county need? How can we set tax rates and others to make sure that when the time comes to need those facilities, that we don't experience 200% increase in taxes? Is there some planning that can be done along the way? And so, and I think that the county is certainly in a good place, but noted that we could make some improvements in that regard. Looking at the county's needs forward, a 10-year capital plan. Another was the county has a statutory maximum for its unassigned general fund balance, and the fund balance has been noted in the rating reports as the county's had good reserves. It's been noted that reserves will have to be used, have been used, and may need to in the future as well. And so looking at tax structure, other things in that regard, I think it would be well for the county to consider avoiding any major decreases in fund balance, or make provision for that fund balance to grow should the need arise to tap into those funds. Recently, this year and last year, on the school district side, and fund balance is very much, as you know, for school districts is an important metric that's followed. We did see some rating downgrades because of eating into general fund balances for facilities. Rating downgrades were not given, though, for those that are planning to use fund balance but then have a plan to replenish those within a 2 to 4 year time period. So a few things.
So again, let me put it in different words and see if you agree. So in other words, it would not be seen as a positive sign. I think I know the answer to this, but if not only our reserves are at a decreasing level, but to signal that we are going to go further into those reserves would be a negative sign.
Yes, yeah, very much so.
There was another one too, that as I sat through that analysis, they did look at some management tactics when we had decreasing revenue and no decreasing expenses, that they signaled. It was an uncomfortable situation to sit there and talk about that, because it was management driven. And so that I know that was one that was flagged as well.
Yes.
That they were asking questions on.
Right. And it's interesting to get that third-party perspective on these things, and it is valuable feedback, and we can take note and strategize. The county, again, still does have tremendous ratings to be AA in the AA category. That's very tremendous, very, very great, but there's always areas that we can improve on. So,
thank you.
Thanks. We appreciate your hard work on this.
Ready for the end of the car commercial? The
You
lawyer
betcha.
to go real fast here. Just a couple details to cover on the resolution. We've noted that this is non-binding. It does approve of a notice of publication to be put in the paper. It will describe the parameters of the bonds, the outer maturity date, which keeps you in line with your current, doesn't extend. As you mentioned with Dave Ramsey, you don't not extending at 15 years left into 30 to get the lower rate. Keeps the footprint the same. It does authorize a supplemental indenture, which is the legal document that would pledge the revenues to the new bonds and also take care of defeasance or refunding of the old bonds. And probably most importantly to you, it also authorizes a preliminary official statement. That's basically the offering circular, the security the bonds will become to the public market. And so those are all authorized in these resolutions. They're attached as exhibits in your packet. For both pieces, there is a designated officers, basically committee, that should the commissioners approve of this resolution, it then defers to allow for, let me just read this to you just for clarity. Oh, I had that. And then okay. The commission will grant to any two of the following: the chair of the commission, or in his absence, the vice chair, and the chief civil county attorney, Mr. Shawcroft. So any two of those can approve of final documentation as long as those bonds fit within these parameters. The reality is that I doubt those officers will operate independently, but nonetheless, as your counsel, that's what you are creating as designated officers to act on behalf of the county to execute final documents within the parameters we've discussed and as Matt's consulted with. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions on that legal process.
I actually do have a follow-up on that. I appreciate you pointing out the distinction. And is that typical with the legislative bodies that you deal with to kind of designate, like, so for example, in that case, even though we're kind of pre-authorizing now, that final action would be taken without a majority of our legislative body and with a non-voting member of our legislative body. So
yeah,
we speak to what's common.
Sure, that is common, but I'll tell you why. The reason being that if we had to convene all three of you, would be an open meeting law requirement, and oftentimes to be nimble on sale price, the financial advisor may indicate a date that wouldn't fall on a standard county commission meeting, and this would authorize a final sale of those bonds without having to go to the county commission to lock in those rates. It is not a requirement. I would say 5 years ago, this wasn't so common, that more rarely did you have a designated officers convention. But that led to many of the bond sales falling on Tuesdays or Thursdays, and sometimes it's better to be on a Wednesday or even a Friday without having to wait for the commission meeting. So it is your discretion as to whether or not to approve that, but we use that convention, which has been used before, but it's not a legal requirement.
I would actually, especially given that we're moving forward, I was kind of moving forward under the assumption that this is a minimum notice, right? And it's kind of, we could be doing this at any point within the next year. But now that I'm realizing that actually it designates some officers the ability to go and pull the trigger at any point, and it doesn't come back to this body, I would only be comfortable approving this without that officer designation, or modifying it to have any two commissioners approving it prior.
I can certainly modify
That's
that
fine.
right now.
I mean, I had some conversations with you about that, Matt, and
That's
and
great.
also with Dave. I had some similar, the way it was explained to me, because I've been through it sitting in those meetings as well, is that the two do not have authority to go outside of the parameters. The parameters are set by this body, and so if there's a savings within this body, you can, but you cannot go outside of the parameters, which we would never set the parameters for a loss, right? We'd only say, you hit here and here, and if you get within that, go for it. Otherwise, there is a no-go. And so that's
And
kind
I see
of,
the wisdom in that. And I see the wisdom of being nimble. That's the point where we're doing this, be nimble to act in the market. However, what that doesn't allow for is the timing. And so because the timing, I think, matters to me, and it's a consideration in voting for this, I'm comfortable doing it if it has to come back essentially to this body.
I'm fine. I'm personally fine with that if we want to have more further discussion. Yeah, because I had
Yeah,
several
that's
questions.
absolutely fine.
So could I, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Commissioner.
No, go ahead.
Well, maybe as an option, I would recommend that you modify the designated officers definition to include at least two of the county commissioners in doing so.
And to me, that's very simple, and it's email, right? Quick phone call with a follow-up email
We make
saying
it
we
all
authorize
three?
it. It shouldn't hold up the process in the timeline setting.
I don't think we need to impose a higher standard than it would take to approve, so I think any two of the three would be.
Yeah, any two of the three, and
I think that's a great change. Again, this is kind of the convention that, has been used in the past, but I think that's a great change. Absolutely.
I want to make sure that this is not to cut Dave out. I mean, we got quite a knowledge with Dave in there, and of course, we can reach back and talk with him because he's seen this over and over and over, and I think it's important that although he may not be designated as a designee on this, we definitely want his perspective and his
Well, we won't be able to close without his opinion.
Yeah, well, actually, and I'm not even suggesting, maybe that is the suggested change, maybe it's not, but I was kind of suggesting adding the two of the three, not necessarily removing any of the other designated officers.
yeah.
we can do that, right?
And that would be my preference, would be just to add the two. And really, you can just add commission approval, right? Because that insinuates two of us.
Just for the record, I have no objection to not being a part of that committee. And actually, I don't know if you want to increase the numbers. If you have two commissioners, I think I would recommend maybe that you keep it at that level. I'll be involved, but that would just facilitate things and not make it more cumbersome with more individuals.
And I would generally concur with that. Dave was included, maybe even somewhat reluctantly, just to help get a second officer in case there was a vacation and things in other times past. But I think if we just change it to have at least two of the county commissioners, effectively Dave will be in the same spot because
can
we
be any
won't close
two.
without his
You
opinion.
say it
So
that way,
any
it can be any
two
two.
of the
That
county
gives us some
commissioners.
flexibility.
Is that? So we'll consider that an amendment to the resolution before you. Designated officers shall be modified to be any two of the current county commissioners.
And how this works from a practical perspective is we decide, again, we'll strategize collectively together on the timing. And once you decide, tell Randy and I to start moving, we move. When bonds are sold, we'll know that day what the interest rate is, what the final terms are. And it's providing you those numbers. We all get on a conference call, and then that's when that actually took place. Action or
I totally agree. It's a pretty deliberate process. There will not be any high pressure to do this or not. You'll know well in advance.
Thank you.
With that, I conclude my legal presentation.
Thank you.
Perfect.
All right. Motions would be in order for 3 and 4 then.
So I would move that we approve regular agenda items number 3 and 4 with amendments designating a required approval of the majority of the county commission.
Second?
I got a motion and a second to consider the adoptions of both 3 and 4 with the changes as noted. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Oh, I didn't hear an aye.
Aye.
Okay. 3, that passes 3-0. Tricked me.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, number 7 is to adopt a resolution approving and authorize the execution of an interlocal cooperative agreement with Vineyard City. The reason why I asked this to be held is because we will be signing it without Vineyard City signing it first. Usually we have the other cities that were before, they signed first. And it affects what happens in item number 8. And so I would be in favor of adopting this resolution being contingent upon Vineyard City also signing. Correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Any
And that-
discussion?
I mean, that's, yeah. And obviously in number 8, if Vineyard City they fully intend to, but if for some reason they didn't sign on, we'd just drop the number
Yeah.
in the state contract to adjust the number accordingly. So that would be, then we're done with it and can get the service going.
My only question on this issue is, is this budgeted?
Mhm.
It is budgeted for this year? Okay. Yeah, I'll make a note of approving this going forward with this historical practice. But looking at, there is a real amount of money that we spend on this program. And I just have an open question that I'd like to look further into at future meetings on, in terms of extending library services to the residents of our county, if this mechanism and this amount of money really achieves the desired access to library services that our county residents want, relative than other solutions that we could probably implement to offer library services. So, but I'm supportive of this for this year going forward.
I would, a couple of years ago, was it, Dave?
Yeah.
Maybe 3 years ago, we had a pretty extensive conversation on this issue. So I'd probably go back and listen to that, because there has been some hesitancy, and also some compromise that came out of this. We had them come and present to us, and so we kind of walked down through that whole issue to kind of get to a conclusion where we're at now. But it doesn't mean that we can't take a peek at it. But I'd just go back and look at all those, and you can kind of see where things are at. Okay.
And I know from my perspective in the unincorporated county, this is a great service, especially the mobile factor of it is actually very helpful, because it gets around to the various stops within unincorporated that allows those residents to have that access. And so I think there's some components of it for that particular citizenry that's helpful.
And those are our direct constituents. We're their local representatives. All right, motion be in order?
I'll move that we adopt regular agenda items number 7 and 8 contingent upon the signing and authorizing of Vineyard City.
And probably, do we need to note, Dave, that
Yeah, on 8, that it would be approved at the full amount as stated on the agreement, assuming that Vineyard does participate. If it not, then it would be reduced to the amount without Vineyard's participation as determined by the State Library Board.
Okay, with a modification that number 8 on the regular agenda, the final contribution will be modified based upon full participation.
Second?
I've got a motion and a second, as stated for agenda item number 7 and 8. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. Okay, number 9, we need to take action. That's the reason why I circled that one. And is there any, do we need to talk about this at all? I don't, I like that we're taking action on this, you know, so it's.
Yeah, this is just the formality of
Yeah,
referring
it is a
to the
formality.
planning commission for the process. The commission's expressed some interest in looking at this, so I want to make it an official action from the commission, so.
Fantastic.
Can you just speak to the general amendment here?
Yeah, yeah, so there's been some interest expressed, Bryce Armstrong, Community Development. There's been some interest expressed from the commission, several commission members of looking at.
Can I just
having-
express those and then?
Yeah.
We have a housing crisis that's going on in Utah County. And this potentially has, I mean, it's not a big thing for us, but it's us doing our part and trying to have dwellings, you know, that are already there, so that we can have multiple dwellings, you know, in a single location. Cities are trying to attack this right now and seeing what they can do. And I personally think, and I know that you're saying multiple commissioners, so I'm assuming there's multiple on this. This is a way for us to kind of step up and say, we'd like to look at addressing this issue as well. It's a concern to us. Here's a way that we can look at it and see if it works appropriately with our zoning laws.
Correct, and in addition to that, there's been a recent state law that's required a county and counties in the state and cities to update their moderate income housing plan. Our general plan usually tries to encourage those into the cities where their services are, but this is a component of that seems feasible that we can do in the county. You know, we can't do high-density transit housing in the county, that's just in unincorporated areas of the county. And so this is a tool for us to maybe utilize some existing stock of housing where the need may exist for those opportunities to have a basement apartment. Provide maybe some affordable housing options.
So what are we actually doing with this?
Allowing the ability to have single-family dwellings that qualify to have an accessory apartment, accessory dwelling unit, either within the home or as a detached unit under certain parameters. So a person can have an actual individual unit that could be rented out to a family member or whoever, a family, and we have a definition of a family, someone who has a source of income and also the opportunity to provide some potential moderate income housing.
Yeah, I know for me, I'm excited to send this on to the planning commission, and I'm even more excited to get it back so we can vote on it, and I think it's, again, for me, at the heart of this is a continued attempt to free up land use practices and avail people of the opportunities to further use their property in a way that's conducive for them, and I love those kind of amendments.
That state bill listed a menu of items that you can choose from, but you have to designate certain items from this menu, for lack of a better word, and I think of those, you have to choose a certain amount, and this is one that seems a practical one for the unincorporated areas of the county to utilize. And so, in addition to the commissioner's desires as stated, I think that's an important part to meet that mandate.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All right, a motion to be in order.
Move to refer regular agenda item number 9 to the planning commission.
Second. We got a motion and a second to take action and refer agenda item number 9 to the planning commission. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. All right, Robert. Number 10 is to adopt an ordinance amending Utah County Code Article 2-1-4C.
Well, this is something we're kind of approaching for two different reasons. From my perspective, from a process perspective, and also from your perspective as commissioners on what types of things are appropriate for the commissioners to need to approve, as opposed to those things that ought to be delegated to department heads, elected officials, or otherwise. In my opinion, our approval processes are pretty burdensome, redundant, multiple layers of approvals for things that really don't require that. As well as requiring commissioners to approve a large number of pretty routine types of transactions. We figure between 2,000 and 3,000 a year. So the hope here is to limit those things those purchases that require commission approval to those things that are of a higher amount, things that are of higher importance for the commissioners to focus on, and let the routine types of things be handled by department heads, elected officials, and such.
Yep. I know we kind of went on the caps and the thresholds back there. I feel comfortable with where they're at. I don't know if there's any other discussion with it, but
I'm comfortable with this. I mean, look, I think that this is part of governing effectively, is revising and updating things that, and Robert, as you pulled this together, when's the last time that this was materially updated?
Well, my time.
Your time, which is how long?
Well, I've only been here 3 years, but
yeah, my understanding is it's over a decade. And this has led to a frustration level within county departments that is incredibly high. And I think it's a no-brainer change. I appreciate the work of your department, the clerk auditor's department, of getting it ready to do this. And I'll also note that this is one of those things that doesn't really, it allows things to operate more smoothly, but it also maintains our ability to completely audit and hold everyone accountable for the purchases, right? And I think sometimes that's been a dialogue that we've had in the county. It's not always about keeping a dollar from leaving the door, right? We still, if there's bad actors, if there's people not following policies, they'll still be subject to discipline, still be subject to audit. But this just allows us to operate in a more smooth manner.
yeah, I to echo that, the frustration level has been all the way through, even on my own personal frustration level to be challenged on, signing off on something that potentially is against, state statute was always very burdensome. And I found it hard that I was the one, or one of the three, that had to make that determination. And so I think this puts the accountability in the right spot, and the accountabilities will have to work through. It'll be interesting to see how how this works with the auditing practices. It does put some more pressure, I guess, on you two, you know, to.
What
to
you
make
hired
sure
me to
it's-
do.
Right, make sure that the things are being purchased according to the policies and procedures and state statutes that we have. And so I think that we're moving in the right direction with it, and it takes off, you know, at least I know as I'm looking at it, the question I have always is, do I click off on that when it doesn't follow our policies and procedures or state statute? And now I'm gonna say, yes, I'm gonna blanket over the top and say, good to go. Moves in a different direction. So I'm glad for more individual responsibility on that. All right, any other questions or thoughts?
Move that we adopt regular agenda item number 1, or number 10.
Second?
I got a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance amended as stated, number 10. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. Number 16, we struck that one. Okay, we tabled. Let's go back to number 2.
If you could go back to that, the request is that that be continued for 2 weeks.
Continue for 2 weeks? Okay, so we'll bring it off the table and then consider that.
Motion to remove regular agenda item number 2 from the table?
Second.
I got a motion and a second to remove posted regular agenda item number 2 from the table. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That is now back on our agenda for consideration. Motion.
Motion to continue regular agenda item number 2 for 2 weeks.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to continue agenda item number 2 for 2 weeks. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that has been moved. Number 22 was tabled. And that's it. From my notes, we only need on closed meetings, number 31 and number 32. Is there any others? Closed session?
I move that we strike regular agenda items number 30 and 33.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to strike agenda items number 30 and 33. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0.
I move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting to discuss the items set forth in regular agenda items number 31 and 32 for today's date immediately following this meeting at this location.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to approve and set a date, time, and location as stated in number 31 and 32. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. Okay, we have 2 more work session items. The first one is a presentation by the Central Utah Water Conservancy District regarding the truth in taxation process. It's mandated that they come before us and present this. So Jean?
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you very much. I have with me Chris Finlinson, one of our assistant general managers. And so if there are hard questions, I will answer all the hard ones. She will answer the easy ones, but I will decide which ones are hard and which ones are easy. You have before you just a real brief presentation. Several years ago, the legislature, as we approach truth in taxation, required that we offer to the governing bodies of our district an opportunity for us to present to them the information that we have put together with regard to our truth in taxation, and that's what this report is today. You'll see on page number 1, we have an outline of the county of our Central Utah Water District boundaries, We cover all of Utah County, all of Salt Lake County, part of Juab County, all of Wasatch County, part of Summit Counties, all of Duchesne, Uintah, and Sanpete counties. So we cover about 62 to 3% of the state's population, and deliver water through a major part of that service area. On page number 2, you'll see our proposed budget based on a pie chart. You'll note that 64% of our budget is construction related, about 21% is debt related, and approximately 15% has to do with this district and project operations. So the majority of our budget this year has to do with construction. As we look at our property tax, the Central Utah Water District is authorized at a maximum of 4 mills or $4 per thousand of $10,000 of evaluation, excuse me. And the certified rate this year was 000378. We are proposing by action of our board last week to move to our authorized amount, which is 0004, which we have done over the last several years. And the difference between the certified rate and the authorized rate is just over $3.6 million. That's on slide number 3. As we look at slide number 4, we have obtained the average household value of a home in Utah County, which is $334,000. You'll see that the certified rate is about $69, almost $70, and with the a proposed authorized rate, that would push that to $73, a difference of $4.05 per household in Utah County. The rate of 0004 is important for the various reasons that are listed on page number 5. I'll just highlight a couple of those. When the Central Utah Project Completion Act was passed in 1992, it required a number of things, one of which was the Central Utah Project, or the Central Utah District, rather than the Bureau of Reclamation, would finish construction. One of the requirements of that was that the Central Utah District had to come up with 35% local cost share for every dollar spent on construction. A task force was put together, and the recommendation was that the district use and maximize its 0004 rate, which we have done in our long-term financial plans and which we have done over the last several years. Another important point is you can all appreciate the fact that the federal partners that we have struggle to obtain sufficient funds to keep up with our construction schedule. And so we are actually advancing part of our property tax value to construct the project, a major part of which is actually happening in Utah County as we speak. So there are others, but those are the primary reasons of pursuing the 0004. On number 6, some of the projects that this money will be used for would be the continued improvement of our water treatment plants. We have the largest one here in Orem, Utah County. We have one in Duchesne County and one in Uinta County. We're also in the middle of repairing the North Fork siphon, which will be an 84-inch diameter pipe, approximately a mile long, that will come out of Upper Stillwater Reservoir down the canyon about 700 feet up the other side. And so that's about a $25 million project that we're in year 2 of a 3-year contract. Another major project that we're involved with right now is the Utah Lake System Pipeline, which is in South Utah County. That project is being installed as we speak, and we anticipate awarding contracts for additional reaches of that project even later this year. You will all know that we just finished the Olmsted Power Plant. There are a few minor cleanup items that we have to cover there, but for the most part, that again is a federal facility, aging infrastructure that we've spent a significant amount of district dollars to complete in order to maintain the viability of the project. We are required, as you know, and will hold hearings, public hearings for this item. We will have 2 hearings. One will be on August 8th in Roosevelt, and the other will be August 12th in our office in Orem, and both of those hearings will begin at 6 p.m. And I would be happy to address any questions that you have if you have any. Thank you very much for your time.
I don't have any questions for you. Thanks for your continued work to keep these projects in good working condition and deliver water to the residents.
Okay. Thank you. I would point out to the audience that Commissioner Lee and Commissioner Ivey are on our board, and so they're very familiar with these issues and represent the county as we deal with the issues across the district boundaries. So thank you very much. Wayne Anderson from Spanish Fork, former mayor, is the other trustee from Central Utah, or from Utah County on Central's board.
Thank you, Gene, and thank you for the opportunity to visit and work down through some of the questions that I had the other day, so.
Great.
thank you.
Always happy to answer questions.
Yep. Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. The next work section item is to discuss the requirement deadlines and as for the Good Governance Advisory Board. Adhering to, Paul?
Sure. I called for this work session. For me, we had the privilege of hearing the recommendations from the Good Governance Advisory Board last week, and it became pretty obvious that if we are going to get this done and have it on the ballot this year, that there's an incredibly tight timeline. And so I did not want to waste any time. I want to talk about the deadlines, just make sure that everyone is on the same page of what needs to be done. And quite frankly, this would probably become a standard practice, I think, from now until the deadline, to have a work session on this topic in our commission meetings to make sure that we're tracking along to that deadline. You know, a couple of things I'll discuss. The recommendations, we had it, the written recommendations were presented with a little bit of a caveat in the meeting, because it's been pointed out that they had recommended independent bodies to study this further, but at the same time, they prioritized getting it done this year. And so we can move forward with kind of our best efforts to involve the public on those remaining issues. So the three big issues that I see, well, it's really one. One is we need to have an optional plan drafted prior to July 19th. And which really, if we're going on our standard commission schedule, which we don't have to, but we might as well, there's a meeting on July 16th. So that's the deadline with our regularly scheduled commission meeting, in which we would need to have an optional plan drafted, voted on, in order to allow at least the 45 days of the county attorneys.
We have.
No, I'm saying that's the last,
Oh, I see.
that's
I
the
see what you're
last
saying.
date we
Okay.
could vote on it
And
to
July
allow.
9th is a commission meeting
Sure.
as well. Yeah.
And so, the first prong of this kind of workflow is working with Paul Jones here to talk about that optional plan. What do we need in there, and just get that going? And then kind of as a parallel path, so we don't wait, we need to have the districts decided and the compensation decided. And so we should be doing those simultaneously. And I'm kind of just throwing this out there. We haven't had a lot of time to coordinate of, compensation. I think that there's a way to get those numbers. In fact, the vice chair of the Good Governance Advisory Board, Rex Facer, was appointed to serve, appointed by the White House to serve on Federal Compensation Committee. They've already done some research into this, and they can provide a memo that gives an independent view on compensation for this body. And then secondly, districts, we can just work directly with the county clerk's office, or any other grouping of that. I think we just need to be, act quickly, and maybe we just do it in a public meeting, or I'm open to involving others in that process as well, to make sure that we can drop those districts into an exhibit to the optional plan as we get ready to vote on it. Those are some of the main considerations that I heard coming out of that meeting of what we would need to get done to have this approved. So I'll pause here if I missed any other major considerations, and then maybe we can have a dialogue with those members of the county who would be involved in these processes.
Maybe while Paul's coming up, one concern I have is the difference between administrative and legislative action. Because we do have restrictions that are placed on us, on a legislative basis. And so, Paul, if you can kind of address that too, because there's a little bit of a tightrope there on how, when we're administrative and when we're in a legislative action.
And here's one point that I'll make after spending some time researching this, but I'll defer to Paul, is that I actually think that those separating the duties is actually more difficult now under our three-member commission form, because state law actually does separate the powers. State law already says legislative and executive responsibilities, and it outlines which ones are which. And only when we're in a combined form, like we are as a county commission, do we have to kind of figure out in which capacity we're acting. If we're if we just press the button and say we're a county mayor or a council mayor system, and there's a legislative executive body, by statute without us even delineating anything. We do have to delineate some things, but for the most part, the law already picks that up and says the legislative body is responsible for this and the executive officer is responsible for this.
That wasn't necessarily my point. My point was is that we wear both hats right now, the executive and the legislative hat, and I'm concerned about where that line is as we go through this process. Where are we behind the scenes making decisions when is that a legislative, if it's a legislative action, are we gonna be calling public meetings for everything? Or do we have administrative roles in which we can, otherwise, as I've seen it when it comes to some legislative issues that are on our agenda, you'll have 3 different proposals on there because you have 3 different groups or 3 different offices looking at it to keep that separation.
Great. Paul Jones from the Attorney's Office. Are you okay if I sit down here during the work session?
I want you to stand up.
You want me to stand
No,
up?
I'm just kidding. You've been sitting like for hours. I want to stand up.
Okay, I'll sit, you stand. Let me just circle back around to Commissioner Ainge, speaking about the deadline, the timeline for this. I have looked into it a little more. I spoke with Mr. Daniels. I actually think your deadline is July 23rd. So that was the original deadline that I had sort of started with, and then we had the 61st, 65-day issue. I'm back to the 23rd. You don't have a commission meeting scheduled. That is a Tuesday, but there is no commission meeting scheduled currently. But just so you know, that is a Tuesday. If you wanted to call a meeting,
I
you could,
appreciate that.
but-
My initial reaction is keep the same deadline.
Yeah,
It's always good to have some cushion.
Right.
Good to have cushion, but I support keeping the same deadline at the 19th.
I'll jump to Commissioner Lee's question, and I haven't talked with Dave Shawcroft on this or anybody, but this action would be by resolution, and so I think that the starting point is that it's a legislative action. I don't think there'd be any departure from that it would seep into an administrative role. Even though it would be more cumbersome and we're on a tight deadline, I am willing to prepare alternatives or whatever it is that you, as commissioners, would want. I have contemplated the idea that there would be multiple drafts or options within a draft or something along those lines. So I do realize that multiple ideas may need to be brought to the table for a vote or a motion or whatever it is. So is that kind of what you were looking for?
And I think from my perspective, Paul, and Commissioner Ainge touched on it briefly, this is why it's a work session today, and if it needs to be next week, it gives us that open public forum to have that dialogue, and of course, we each have the opportunity to individually speak with you and express, hey, we'd like to see this or that, and I fully, I know you'll do a good job at incorporating those, and then we can hash them out here.
Yeah, so certainly you can't come to a final decision outside of a public meeting or a commission meeting here. Certainly, I think you can, like right now here in a work session, it would be good to indicate things you'd be interested in seeing, et cetera, but without coming to a final decision with an actual resolution on an agenda. And so there are 2 items, and I don't know if we want to bring those up. At least there are a lot of items, but there are 2 where the Good Government Advisory Board, they recommended getting more involvement on the districting and the compensation. I made sure that Ralph Barnes would be here. I don't know what involvement you would like to, what direction you want to give him. I know he would be a resource on compensation. You mentioned Dr. Facer. That would need to be probably a commission-directed process to come up with the compensation for the executive and the council members. Do you want to discuss that now, or do you want me to put them all out there?
The question is, why can't that be administrative? Does it have to be legislative and a directive like that? I don't know why we can't just administratively say, Ralph, let's have you, because we're not supposed to be making decisions here in this meeting.
Well, Ralph could clearly provide you, you could give him direction to provide you with a recommended salary for
How do we,
this.
and the direction comes from what? Comes from,
Right here. It's not making any decision other than just a request from the commission that he,
You wouldn't be binding yourself to anything, you would be asking for information, right?
Yeah.
right.
And for me, I'm comfortable, given the expediency that we face here in the timeline, I'm comfortable just awaiting for this memo that will come in from the Romney Institute of Public Management and Dr. Facer, who's already been a part of this whole process and studying, and they've said that that would fulfill their opinion requirements of an independent view on compensation.
This is Ralph Barnes, HR Director. I certainly welcome that information on compensation, but if these are going to be county employees, the recommendation does need to come from the HR
Right,
department.
and so to me, that's why I think we, for me personally, I think we give Rex the directive to work, excuse me, with his students to develop the memo, and then Ralph has the opportunity to review it from an internal standpoint and make a recommendation to us. So we get the outside input and independence we're looking for from that board with some great expertise in the area, given his background, and then we have another outside of the commission view for a full recommendation that comes back to us and meets within the statutes of his responsibilities.
And I just want to clarify one thing, Ralph. When I'm talking about this, I'm talking about the elected officials. I'm talking about the council and the mayor. I'm not talking about any other county employees.
Which we would need that information as well. I think we would still make the recommendation, through the HR department as what the elected officials should be making as well, but there is, significant, staff support for this. Salt Lake, I think, has 18 employees who, support the council. So I just want to make sure that we're involved from the front end of this on the compensation side, and we are happy to be involved and do as much as we can to support this.
And I think, by the way, it would be helpful for you as soon as possible to perhaps be in contact with Dr. Facer on it, because if they have any questions about the existing benefits and things like that, you can be a resource so that that memo contemplates what's actually happening already in the county.
plus every time we go through a market study, they always ask for a job description. And so to accurately measure that.
You have to match the jobs.
It's got to have a certain amount of a job description in place, or else it could be wildly swung in different directions.
There's going to be several new jobs associated with this, obviously. So there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done on the compensation side. But I'm very excited about the fact that we have an expert in this area that we can utilize in this. So that sounds great.
Yep.
Okay.
The other issue that may take some time is the formation of districts and districting. I don't know if, what process the commission wants to follow to create districts. How many districts, how many at large, what kind of direction. I assume that the clerk auditor is going to play a very, active role in preparing that, and I don't know who else or what other process that the Board of Commissioners would like to see play out in order to get districts established.
I know from my perspective, I'm happy to follow the recommendation of the recommending board for the 5 districts with the 2 at large. I think we have highly qualified staff in both the clerk auditors and in our IT department within our mapping division to crunch those out. In conversations with some of those, they feel that they can expedite those and have them actually fairly quickly and very accurately. And so I would be comfortable myself with that particular structure and the directive to them to establish those. And also I wanted to just touch briefly on Ralph's comment on staffing. My personal preference in our optional plan is to leave staffing to the newly established body. I think they should have the opportunity to decide what level of staffing that they see as appropriate.
Paul, you and I have talked on this districting. I have a little different, I'm looking at it a little differently. One of the issues that I'm concerned with is that if we have 7 with 2 at large, there's a possibility that an individual in one of the 5 districts, and with the 2 at large, there could be four four council members, that somebody in the district doesn't have any representation. They don't have direct representation. It seems a little out of balance to me. I would probably prefer that we go with a 5 with a 3 and then 2 at large. That way, the 2 at large and somebody in the district, you have at least a majority of representation sitting on the council. And so I know we've had those discussions, and I'd like to explore that.
Help me understand how they wouldn't have representation.
If you've got 7, and you live in one of the districts, let's say you live in that district, you could potentially have 4 districts over here voting against an issue that you may not like, and you have no ability to go and they could say, well, we don't really care because the 4 over here, we're all on the same side, even if you have the 2 at large, and so you wind up with not a majority. And you can't say, well, maybe we want to run somebody against you or whatever the case may be because you're not in that district, and so you wind up with no representation.
I guess I don't.
I'm just saying that if you have 5 and you have 2 at large, any 3 in that district, if you live in one of those 3 districts, you have the ability to have a majority of representation that represents you. At the 7, you could wind up with 4 districts that don't represent you at all.
Are you saying is the plan to have 5 council members in 3 districts?
3 districts.
Why not have 5 districts?
No, it's 5 districts. I think that the point, this might not be the same point. I've heard people make the argument that, so for example, I think what Commissioner Lee might be proposing is if there were 3 at large and 4 districted, then if you're any resident in the county,
Well, that's the other option.
you feel like at any point in time, you can get a majority on your side if you just get the at-large and that one who represents your district. So for me, this is not an issue of debating this. I don't know how much either the petition group or the Good Governance Advisory Board thought of the nuance of balancing the at-large versus the districting. I think that most of the discussion I heard was the 5 districts is probably a better distribution of the districts in the county. But for me, it's kind of, this isn't debating this. We've received the recommendation, so I'm comfortable moving with the recommendations of the Good Governance Advisory Board. But I had heard those arguments early on in the process as well.
And you could do it with 7, but you'd have to change the at-large.
The number of at-large.
You'd have to have 3 at-large.
That would shift that balance, yeah.
That would shift that balance.
So what Commissioner Lee is saying is if there are 7 council members and 4 districts and 3 at large, if they're all present, that every affirmative vote would require at least one person that represents everybody in all the districts separately. And I guess that's kind of your point, right? That every vote would require at least somebody that represents
At large.
each person. Yeah, at least one at-large person, or actually, or the district that you live in would have to vote for it. So,
I've never heard the counterpoint to that. I welcome it. To me, that it resonates a little bit.
I could have said this sitting down, but apparently there's a microphone that's recording or that's being filmed or something. I want you 3 to understand the complex relationship that the county attorney has with everyone in this process.
Mm-hmm.
I represent the county clerk who has, I think, strong opinions about this. I represent the county commission as a body. And I believe as county attorney, I'm also a check on some of the actions of the county commission. And also I think I have a duty as a county attorney to look out for the county as a whole. I will restate, just for the record, that what you're just talking about, this discussion on the nuances of this is the sort of discussion that ought to occur
in many public debates and many public meetings over the course of time. I don't know why we're in such a hurry to put this on the ballot. I don't know what the politics are behind it. I don't care what the politics are behind it. But I think it is ill-advised to move forward so quickly. I think that there's more at risk in making a wrong decision and moving quickly than can possibly be had by correcting something that we think is flawed by doing it now. Having said that, I understand that 2 members of this commission want to move forward, and as my hat as the county attorney, my office will lend its support to make sure that the resources are there to make sure that everything we need to do to put this plan together comes to pass. You know, you'll not find me obstructing in any respect there. But I would caution you to realize that this is, you know, these are very nuanced questions, and I just think that, you know, clearly this is the direction we're going in putting on 2019. So if we can come up with a timeline that includes some public comment, a timeline that includes some opportunity for lots of discussion. It doesn't matter to me whether this is a public discussion or in a works, you know, administrative session. The 3 commissioners, and I include Commissioner Lee, who doesn't necessarily support putting on 2019. This is something that, as elected officials, we all need to participate in. And so, let's come up with a plan that will satisfy those needs.
One comment about that, Mr. Lovett, is I think that you do hold some cards in this conversation about our ability to deliberate. And that is, if you insist on the 45-day review period, it forces us, essentially, if we want to support putting it on the 2019 ballot, to come up with our vote on the recommendation by July 19th or July 23rd. If you were to agree to collaborate with us and work together and have a series of public meetings, it would extend our ability to deliberate on this a little bit longer before taking a vote. But that would require you to not say that you're going to take your 45-day review period or not all of your 45-day review period. So I just make that as a comment.
No, and I understand. And my response to that is this. If this process is going along in a way that makes sense, that informs the public, that looks at all the risks, I am open to the possibility of shortening my 45-day period. I'm keeping my powder dry on that because if it looks to me like there's political gamesmanship that's going on, if this is going to benefit one faction or another, then I'm not likely to give up my 45 days. And so that's something that we'll just have to walk through together. And this is one of those odd times in the relationship when I'm both your legal advisor and your check. And I trust that we'll get through that in a statesmanlike and satisfactory way. I will state once more that if the rise and fall of this and getting it right demands that we subvert any part of this process, including my 45 days, I would suggest that maybe we're taking it too quickly. Thanks.
I know personally I get a little tired of the political tactics of continuing to stall something we oppose. And so I think when we make a decision that has gone through a very public, deliberate process where there were multiple public meetings held with a lot of public input and input from mayors, council members, and very engaged members of this community, that we have to keep that in mind as well. And then it behooves us to come to a point in time where we cooperatively take action and move forward in a productive manner.
I agree, and I agree with the sentiment that that the form of government in general has had lots of open public debate. There has been zero public debate with regard to some of the fine-tuned nuances of the, we are, as I said in an email, separating conjoined twins. And there, you know, and while statute does say you've got the executive and you've got the legislative, statute also says that you can modify that and work it to it. And there's been no discussion on that. There needs to be significant discussion on what the relationship is between the county mayor and the other elected executives. County clerk auditor, the treasurer, the assessor, the recorder, the surveyor, the sheriff, the attorney. You know, we really need to nail down what it is this county mayor is going to be doing, because most of the executive functions of county government is run by other elected officials. The other thing that has had no public debate or comment whatsoever has been the districts. And, you know, in addition to the nuance, so to suggest that the Good Governance Board has satisfied the requirement of public comment, I don't believe that's occurred.
Well, I also believe, David, I'm an elected representative of the people, and that it comes a point in time where I'm elected to do my job, to represent them, and work through some of these nuances.
I agree completely with that.
So let me jump in on the districts again, going back. I don't know if you want to look over at Josh Daniels and say, this is what, you know, do you want 5 districts and you want a couple options of looking at the geographic lines? You know, I just, personally, I don't want to have to follow up with Josh. I want you guys to follow up with Josh and say, Josh, this is what I want. I want 3 options of 5 districts. Commissioner Lee can say, you know what, I'd like to see what 3 districts looks like. I mean, I don't know what the Board of Commissioners wants as far as options go on the districting, but hopefully you could talk to the clerk auditor and just ask him what you want. Commissioner Ivey might just say, give me 5 districts and I'll be good. I don't know.
Well, I mean, like I had mentioned earlier, that was my feeling. I still haven't quite processed and understood Commissioner Lee's point on the 3 at large. I'm still a little confused on that point, and maybe I'm getting hung up on how one district doesn't have representation. Perhaps it's because I'm like, well, you're elected, you have the seat. You have a voice, you have a vote. I don't know. I'm not familiar with another body where we would reference that, and so I'd be curious if there's a body or an example where that's problematic. I mean, I look at our State House of Representatives. I think every district has a vote. Now, naturally, they don't have an at-large seat there, and so the at-large kind of plays into that as a nuance that I'm not familiar with in another elected body. And so I'm happy to hear about those scenarios to where that could play out. But that's where I'm a little hung up on that. Because what I'm saying is when I hear that they don't have representation, they have a vote. So I don't understand how that's, you know, they don't have representation.
Well,
and maybe what you're trying to say is there's political gamesmanships to where people could work behind the scenes to try and shut somebody out that they're objected to. Is that maybe more what you're saying with that particular format? That's
they're representative. They could be representative with maybe the 2 at large in that one example, right? Because those 2 at large are all elected for everybody, not just for the district. But there could become a time in which the 4 districts themselves could override even the electeds, even the at large and 1 district, in the sense that if the 2 and an individual that sits in this district, this 1 district, they don't have any ability to have a representative that they can directly go to because these 2 voted with them and this one voted with them, but these all here voted against them. So if they go to them, and I'll give you a case and example. I've been back in DC before and other places where I've gone to them and said, you know, hey, what about this? And they say, do you live in my district? Oh, you're not in my district? You get lesser value. It's just it's an obvious. And so you could have an individual living in this district, the two at-larges with them, but they go to talk over here and it's not their constituent. And that's my concern is that they don't have a relationship in which you have a majority that they can draw upon. And that's just it's a concern. I've heard that voiced numerous times. Yeah, if you had 7 and you had 3 at large, then every district you had with the other 4, somebody out of that area you'd have at least the ability to say, I am being represented. I have representative is probably the wrong word, but I have the ability to go talk and say, I am one of your constituents. And you can't have a majority just say, I'm going to vote against you, or in this case against you, without the ability to go say, I am one of your constituents. Because somebody has to be, you can't do that with the 3 at large.
Going back to my 45 days, it seems to me that you need to know that sooner rather than later. Because you have timeline A, because it's a collective intent of the county commission, as I understand it, to have this on the ballot in 2019, one way or the other. Is that right? And so we're going to have timeline A if I give you my 45 days, or if I'm going to give you, 35 of my 45 days or something like that. And we'll have timeline B if I say, I just can't get behind this. It would be helpful, and the commitment that I'll make to the 3 of you in good faith is that I'll have a conversation with client 1, who's the county clerk, and this is the numerical order is not preferential. I'll have a conversation with the clerk auditor with regard to my representation there. I'll have a conversation with each of you individually with regard to how this is going, and I'll give you an answer in a relative, as soon as the 3 of us, meaning as soon as I have those 4 conversations with regard to what I'll do with that. But can you give me some idea of what timeline you're looking at now? Can we look at that, assuming Plan A and Plan B, timeline A and timeline B?
So from my perspective, timeline A was what we laid out here, which is get this optional plan drafted by really July 16th and be ready for a vote at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
If that is what contemplates your review period, if we did not need to review that review or utilize that review period, or if we could utilize that review period, we would have up until the end of August to vote, because the true timeline of placing this on the ballot is the ballot deadline, right? And we've only moved that forward to mid-July to accommodate your review period.
Right.
So to me, those are the two timelines that we're dealing with.
Okay, and to put a plan together, what does that look like as far as?
From my perspective right now on the districting side, because I have committed to follow the recommendations of the committee, I am, I feel like we're drafting the plan no matter what, getting ready for the 16th. We're waiting for some feedback on compensation, which can be plugged into that plan. We're also going to be waiting in a separate process for the clerk auditor to have their conversations on districting all the way up until the 16th. And we can plug that in as an exhibit. And we've been having separate public meetings throughout that deadline. That one is accelerated. I actually think they can do it. And I think with their IT systems, they can do it. And I look forward to having, I don't want to speak for them, so I want to let Josh speak. But to me, that is one area where there could be some benefit of you offering up some of your review period that would allow for some further and some more notice in the dialogue of the districting and could push our vote date back by a few weeks on getting those districts drawn up.
Right.
I think the only other consideration is a consideration about there may be some other strategic interests in protecting the interests of the county to be able to vote on this. That is another timing consideration as to when we vote.
I don't understand, I don't follow what you're saying.
And that goes back to the rights of petitioners and the rights of the county commissioners to vote as long as there's something filed from a petition group.
I'm not following what you're saying. Can you start that again?
So the county commission cannot vote.
Right.
Right? To
Tell-
place
tell-
an optional plan
the 9th
if
or
there's
10th
an
or something,
optional
right.
plan filed by petitioners in place.
Right.
Currently, there's one in place.
Right.
Right? Theoretically, there could be another one in place. So that's what I'm saying. The county, in order to preserve our ability to act, we have to be mindful of the timing and the mechanisms in which we can act as a commission to place an optional plan on the ballot.
Sure. So as to not be preempted. Okay, so today's what's today, the 25th? 25th of June?
June 25th.
You're meeting on this, you're not meeting on the second, you're meeting on the 2nd
We don't have a scheduled meeting on the 2nd. We have a scheduled meeting on the 9th.
of July?
Yes.
So what if you proceed with all due haste, as if I'm not gonna give you my 45 days? That'd be the safest for, I'm not saying one way or the other, but then by the 9th, I can give you my answer. And if I say, no, I really want all 45 days, and I'll base that on what I'm seeing by way of the quality of the product that we're putting together, then you can stress that timeline out. Because if I tell you, then I'll do it. If I tell you I'm not gonna give you the 45 days, then you'll have time to act. That sound fair?
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Does anyone have any questions of me? I have another matter I gotta go take care of, unless you have something for me here.
No.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Josh, before we turn to you, I did see Mayor Reese here, and for me, even though this is not really a conversation, I mean, I'm actually very interested in the arguments and the debate of it. Pending some sort of change or some sort of additional dialogue, I want to move forward with recommendations, but I think Commissioner Lee raised a good point about this districting, and I think Mayor Reese may be able to speak to that. I want to give you the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Yes, actually, it is something that was talked about a little bit. In fact, I got a message from Auditor Dougal a few days ago, and he questions whether we should have any at-large. He would like them to all be by district, and so there is some give and take there. And the reason why the decision was made to go with 5 districts and 2 at-large was to model it very similarly to how we have that set up with House of Representatives being representative of by population. Senate, you have 2 that are generally at large. The concern with having more at large is that if you have 4 districts, 3 at large, then there is the opportunity for county resources to be directed towards those cities that have the higher population. Where you could have, if you have a district that represents mainly Provo, and they want something, and those 3 at-large commissioners also are worried about those high-populated areas, then those smaller communities tend to be ignored, and that's what we're tending to see now. I think that's why at Nebo School District, that's why you had so many people from South Utah County coming up saying we want to change in our form of government, is because they feel like they haven't received the time and attention and resources from the county that some of the larger populated areas have. So in this situation, we have districts that need to really work together. And I would look at it the way that the cities are working together in the county. You guys come to COG and MAG meetings. There are many times when I advocate for something that's not going to directly benefit my city, but from a regional perspective, it makes sense. I work well with Mayor Frost, who's here, and Mayor Mann, who was here earlier. So it was that desire to have regional representation and to have every part of the county really have a voice in the decisions that are being made, and not allowing a situation where the higher areas can just pull in all of the votes that they need, because that's where the attention and focus will be. And the way that the government is set up with an executive branch and a legislative branch, if there are political shenanigans that are going on, we have it set up, or it is set up by state code, that the mayor can always veto decisions that are made by the council. The council has the authority to overrule the mayor with a 2/3 majority. And so I hope that we don't get distracted by some of these, what if scenarios, and keep from doing what the committee's recommending. They did an incredible job of researching these options, and we did talk about that districting and why it made sense to have fewer at large and more at district. And like I said, it was a great compromise, because there are people who feel like we shouldn't have any at large. Because in theory, it sounds good that you're going to have somebody who is looking out for the entire county. In practice, that generally isn't the case. It's the higher populated areas that receive that time and attention and resources. So we want to make sure that the smaller cities and the more rural areas are having an opportunity to have their voices heard and represented as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I just got to point out one thing. 4 of the last 7 commissioners were from South County. So, when we're talking about representation over the last little while, 4 of the last 7 have lived in South County. And, so some of the arguments with that, I think, fall a little hollow for me, because if we're truly looking at representation, all the way through, we should put them all at large. Like Commissioner Ellertson mentioned, I have been an advocate for the farmers, for the ag groups down there, as much as I've been an advocate for things up north. And in some cases, they may think that's flip-flop back and forth. It just, but again, 4 of the last 7 commissioners have been South County.
So Josh, can we maybe turn to you and, feel free to express any comments you have. From my perspective, kind of the angle that I would like to take, other than your personal comments, are, if we just want to go forward with this plan of 5 districts and have it ready to drop into the optional plan by July 16th, what do we need to do? Do we feel like we're prepared to do that? And perhaps we should have a discussion among us now in this work session of, before turning you and your team loose to go and draw up some potential plans and maps, are there some principles we need to have in mind to give some direction?
In terms of just drawing lines on maps, that's really easy. The challenge is just thinking about, as you're drawing those lines, drawing them in ways that will disrupt as little as possible some of our other kinds of boundaries that already exist on those maps. And I think that can be facilitated technologically so that it's also relatively easy. Our biggest work burden just comes with the implementation of those new boundaries. So we stand ready to help in the map drawing process, whether it's 5 districts or 7 districts. I guess you're talking about 5 district boundaries. Yeah, we can help with that.
And so I want to understand that, because I've heard Amelia talk as well about VISTA and that process, right? That's the harder process. But my understanding is that process is really, so the deadline we're talking about now in terms of voting on the optional plan does not require anything to be done in VISTA, right? That's more getting ready for the next election cycle.
That's right.
So if the goal now is just to have lines drawn to be able to have on a map in the optional plan, we feel like we can do that. And even though we don't need it in VISTA, we still care, to your point, that we have as little disruption as possible, that we're not splitting precincts, but we can do that in this process.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you just have to have the data. GIS has to have the data so that as we're looking at drawing these boundaries, they've got the right data to work with. And there's still some open questions we're going to have to research. For example, the way that you balance the districts is based on population, not based on registered voters. So when we look at drawing precinct boundaries, we actually look at voters, not population. When you look at political boundaries, you have to look at population. Well, which population figures do you look at? Does the law require you to go back to the last decennial census and use those sort of official numbers, if you will, or can you use updated population figures from more recently from the community survey, which also is related to the census, but it's not the same, right? But those would be more accurate numbers. So there's some of those considerations have to go into the drawing of the districts. I think getting direction from you all about what you want the districts to look like roughly would be helpful, because then we could draw more precise lines based on the various parameters set by law. For example, one, if I'll call it an unofficial diagram that the petitioners have shared, right? Because again, we have not received the petition, right? The petition is being presumably circulated for signatures. So the final official plan that the petitioners have, well, that would be in their possession, right? So, but unofficially, those proposed boundaries, if that's how you want to proceed, we can get with community development, start to get more precise about those boundaries. There's also some question about how precise do the boundaries have to be as part of the plan that gets proposed. And, do those details have to be done by the time you pass your resolution? Because we can go to the ballot with the resolution language, that's pretty much prescribed by statute. How detailed does the plan have to be before Election Day? That's a question that I've got in my mind.
And I think there's some validity to that as I've looked into it. But the challenge that I have is that your department's biggest objection has been the integration and the implementation issue, right?
Right.
And so to me, by having those as final as possible is
better.
always better.
Always better.
Because then you have more lead time to prepare for an implementation.
Yep.
So, but I mean, in a pinch, if somehow we don't get there, maybe that's helpful for us to realize that it doesn't actually have to be completely final, but we should do everything we can, right, to have it in a good form.
Because the real deadline for the final detailed down to the precinct level needs to be completed before we begin the filing process for candidates.
Right.
Right.
So,
And so when we're talking about, election deadlines and true hard deadlines for details on a precinct level, we're talking about filing deadlines so that people are informed and educated on where their district is and where they can file to run.
yeah, in broad strokes, yes. December 1 really for this cycle has to be the deadline because we can't make changes to precinct boundaries after that, given the March primary that'll be next year, which is sort of a non-typical situation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to remind you, Utah Code states that the optional plan must be complete at the time that a legislative body adopts a resolution. And those districts are part of the optional plan. I don't know of any mechanism that you have to tinker with those boundaries after the resolution has been passed and the whole county knows about them. So I think you need to just plan on having those districts finalized with the resolution.
So my hope is that we can leave even today with all the various departments knowing what they need to get started on. So you're asking for some direction potentially from us, Josh. You also asked a question about what data we can use. Do we have any feedback from the attorney's office on what census data we're allowed to use in drawing these districts?
I can look into that. I think the only thing I've seen so far is that the districts must be substantially equal in population. But I can work with Josh and we can see if there's any clear direction about whether it's the 2000 census or its updates.
And then Commissioner Ivey, a question I have for you is, or county attorney's office, is there any, as we draw districts, is there any special consideration that should be given to those members in unincorporated areas, since their relationship to county government is fundamentally different than other residents of the county?
That's a good question. It's actually one that we've talked about and I have mixed emotions on, because I think there is certainly value in having unincorporated be part of one district, but it has to be balanced with ensuring that we have the population metrics balanced out. And so I think there's value in that. The tricky part with that becomes the pockets of unincorporated that we have throughout the county. Like Mayor Frost right here, I know we've got one resident in American Fork that's in an unincorporated county, right? So do you plunk that unincorporated out of that district boundary to put it in with something else? And so to me, some of those nuances make it to where it becomes probably problematic to try and isolate them out because of the little pockets of unincorporated that exist throughout the county. And so I would think that in mapping, you would probably try and encompass, you know, the larger portion of unincorporated with a single district, but I don't think that it's really even feasible to have them, you know, like all of unincorporated county within one district, and maybe, you know, scooched in to get the numbers for population with Spanish Fork, whatever.
And by law, we might be limited.
It would be a nightmare. And so I think generally speaking, it would be great if you kept a large bulk of unincorporated county. And we really kind of have a pretty good census of where that is, right? We have some left up on the north end of the county, and then it primarily flows down through Palmyra, Lakeshore, Benjamin, West Mountain. You know, those are really the larger areas population base wise. And so I would see value in trying to keep them as a district, but a nightmare to try and really isolate unincorporated residents.
And by law, we might be limited. We can't probably differentiate. We have to just do it based on population. Is that right? We can't really distinguish?
So the districts have to be balanced based on population. So you have to have an idea of what the population would be in each district, and the variance between them can't be too significant. So they have to be relatively balanced.
It's like what,
based on population.
2,500 people probably or so? Do you know the number there?
Oh, for the districts, are you talking differently than the council districts?
No, I'm talking council districts.
Yeah, for the council districts, I mean, you're looking at a fifth of the county's population, which would be something like 100,000 people.
The difference would probably be below 5%, though. Is that a fair?
Right, that's
Yeah.
Is that a fair?
Yeah. I think it's even smaller.
Maybe,
I've seen like
yeah,
a 2%.
2.5% or something.
2.5. Our redistricting expert also does double duty and does your minutes. So she's our redistricting expert. She's been through the process in Salt Lake County.
So should we lay
2.5%.
out some principles? So one principle that I'm gathering from your comments, Commissioner Ivey, is that in one of the districts, we should try to encapsulate the largest area of contiguous unincorporated county as we can, while also picking up its close areas that will add to the population base to allow it to be a district.
Right, and that's, for me, it's following the principle behind districts, right? There's a reason we created the House of Representatives, and it has the 200+ members versus the Senate that has the 2, is because we're trying to capture representation for those particular areas, which do have their own individual interests. You know, and so when we block those together, we give those particular community pools a voice. And so I think that's why that would be beneficial. And when we look at the district, you know, as those maps are drawn out, what we're trying to do is capture that throughout the county. As we're looking at those population bases, we're trying to capture the capacity for individual communities to have that representation, because they each face needs that are unique to them.
So another principle I've heard thrown out there is to try to split cities as few as, you know, try not to do that if possible. I don't know if that's in conflict with another desire we have from a precinct database to make sure that we're not splitting legislative districts.
Yeah, I mean, we would prefer lines that are drawn along as many existing political boundary lines as possible, whether those be municipal boundaries, you know, state legislative boundaries, other even school district boundaries. We're going to look to align as many boundaries as we can, because that's going to set us up for the most success in redistricting in the future.
And for me, it makes a lot of sense to try and mirror those lines along state legislative bounds, because then we're keeping those groups together in the most cohesive manner that we are. You're not living in one legislative district in an entirely different county council district. Those are mirrored as closely as possible, given the restrictions with distributing population base.
So for the first draft, is there any other direction that we would give to Josh other than draw 5 districts that one of which incorporates as much of contiguous unincorporated county as possible, and that are balanced by population and split legislative districts, try to avoid splitting legislative districts wherever possible?
That would be my feelings.
Yeah, that works for us, and that's exactly what we prefer, so.
Of course, I'd like to see, different, but it looks like
I mean, how much work is that? I mean, to me, that's not lost on if we're having, I'm trying to act to meet timelines, but I'm also open, Commissioner Lee, as we have this discussion, to exploring what the 4 looks like. But I want to prioritize getting the 5 done. That's what's been recommended.
Sure.
And move forward. But in that process, just, I think that's the goal, is let's get a draft of 5, right? And that will help us push the dialogue along. David Levitt has spoken that that's important to him, to seeing this process, that we're making progress. So I guess that's my ask to both Paul Jones, Josh Daniels, and your respective departments to, next time we have a meeting, we'll have this work session again on the agenda, and perhaps you can talk about some of the progress that you've made and the drafts that you've got. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yep, works for us. We'll get with IT and find out if their subscription for their AI is up and running yet.
Inside joke.
There are a number of other issues. I don't know how much time the commissioners are planning on spending in the work session.
Today?
Yeah, right now. You planning on wrapping up?
What other
Which is
major
fine.
ones?
What other issues? Yeah.
Maybe just highlight the major
Right, yeah, I
ones,
can
and
just
if there's
highlight them. You
one
can
we
be
want to
thinking of
address, we can
them.
address
One
it.
is terms of office. So for the 7 members, some counties have different terms of office for the at-large versus the district representative. So terms of office need to be defined. Staggering terms would be probably be advisable.
Right. So for me, I think that's an easy address. I like the 4-year term for everyone. I think you keep everybody on a level playing field within the council. But I think we definitely have to start off with some staggered terms so that those elections happen at various times.
So there would be some initial 2-year terms.
Right.
But then they would roll into 4.
Right. There could be initial 2-year terms that would then roll into 4. So for me personally, I like to see the entire council on a 4-year term because I think it's cohesive. And then as far as staggering, I absolutely think we have to stagger that we start with some that are 2. And you can certainly maybe put the 2 at large as a 4-year term initially, and then 2 or 3 of the districts would be a 2-year term to start with, and so that you'd have those then become staggered through the election cycles.
Now, I haven't completely fleshed this out, but you may have options, particularly for the 2 at large. Do you envision seeing like a seat A and seat B, kind of like how you are currently elected? Or would you see it as, for example, the top 2 candidates for office would be elected? And I haven't completely looked into that, see what your options are, but if you are inclined to do something like that, we can look into it. Certainly seats A and B, I think, would be authorized. Anything else, I'd have to look into. But
I have spent some time thinking about that, and I think, for example, I felt like with the way we have it now, where we have 2 seats up for re-election at the same time, I think it would lead to a better process if you just take the best candidates from the whole field.
And that's...
However, and so I started looking into that, but with the current structure, if we really only have 2 at large, if you stagger those 2, then you never have that problem ever again, right?
Right. So
because they're just not up
yeah.
at the same time, and then you solve some of those issues, because it does add some complexity to get that best of the field feature by changing the law. So if you just stagger them and you just make sure that you don't have 2 people for the exact same seat running, and like we kind of have now.
Right.
So if you stagger the 2
Obviously,
at large,
Bill and I would have won no matter what, so.
Obviously.
So if you stagger the 2 at large, then they would never be running at the same time, obviously, and so
Right.
that wouldn't be an issue.
Actually, to me, I hadn't thought of that scenario, but that actually probably makes the most sense, would be to stagger those. And then, if they were to be in the same year, I would definitely be a proponent of the 2 highest vote getters or the 2 people elected, and not have them separated out.
Just a quick thought, I think you may want to have that plan though, because if you had an at-large that wound up not being able to fulfill their full term and had to come in on that off year, then you'd have those two there. So you may want to have some sort of a plan for that.
They serve for the duration.
What's that?
Are you talking about if they
But
left
I'm just saying
early?
if you had somebody that had to come in and be elected in that.
Like a midterm vacancy.
The midterm election, isn't that how it works? If somebody doesn't fill their full term, they get elected at the next general election?
Oh,
That might.
they get appointed and then they have to.
Oh, okay.
Just
Because they're appointed, but they'd only serve for like 6 months
Right.
before the next general election, which could fall in the same time frame as the other at-large.
Yeah, interesting.
That would be an interesting nuance that we'd have to.
They could fill the
Great point,
unexpired
Richard.
term. You could have them fill the unexpired term for that election.
So that would be the way around that.
The law says they have to go to the next general election.
To fill the unexpired term or to start a new term?
No, if they start halfway through, before halfway through, they have to go to the next general election. And if they resign 3/4 of the way, they still have to go to the next general election. I think it's probably county election, but.
All right, Paul?
Yeah, we can look into
Paul,
that.
what other issues do you highlight?
The code speaks about the option of including in the optional plan any combining of offices. And so I'm not advocating for that, but if the commissioners wanted to look into those issues, combining office, separating offices, that's something you can look into.
Within the county at large or within?
Like other executive offices, like
Yeah.
clerk, auditor, and things like that?
Okay.
Okay.
There is this really interesting interplay between details. So the commission can include any provisions that you find necessary and advisable for the effective operation of the proposed plan that are not required, but you could include. And the code provides that for the future legislative body to make an amendment to any detail in the plan would require a 2/3 majority vote. If it's a detail that's not required to be in the plan and you leave it out of the plan, then that would just be something that the legislative body could change or interact with based on a majority vote. So as you kind of think about some of these
Paul,
things, leaving them in.
Give an example of this, because I know we had this conversation and it gets really confusing, but give an example.
Yeah, so the example I've sort of thought about is staff for the council. So if the optional, so certainly you don't have to include any information in the optional plan about the staff. So that detail is completely elective. But you could include that. You could find that it's necessary and advisable to include the staffing portion for the council or for the mayor or either one. Now, a change to that, if it's in the plan, it's going to require a 2/3 vote of the council to add a staff member, take a staff member away. If you include compensation of staff, then it's going to require a 2/3 vote to change compensation. If you don't put it in the plan, then the council would just change staffing plan like they normally would, just by majority vote to a change in staffing plan or compensation. And so it just changes the amount of support that any of those items are going to need in the future.
I know for me, from my perspective on this is why I'd like our plan to be a general, a skeletal structure, and a lot of those finite details are left out, because it then becomes the responsibility of the new elected officials, the new legislative body to work those out. And it gives them the flexibility as they're working through that process. I mean, they might start off with saying, we only need 2 staff for the whole entire council. And then if they get a year into it and go, actually, this is too much workload for 2 staff, I think they should have that flexibility to make those modifications just like we would currently in our positions with a majority vote. So that's why on some of those finite details, I would actually leave those to the new elected body to work out, because it gives them that opportunity to govern and work within that structure, to meet their needs as they arise, without being bound to something that we've done previously.
I may
So-
express,
so-
go ahead.
Hopefully, I'm just looking at time and getting a little nervous because I know we still have closed meetings and we have,
All right.
I know public comments here, and then we have another meeting at 1 o'clock, so I'm trying to balance where we're at and try to keep us
Sure.
on track.
And I don't know which, which one to prioritize, but I would express a slightly different view in that I do see some benefit. As we're trying to get this done, I think we do need to emphasize the basic skeleton to make sure that we're ready to vote on that. As we start to fine tune it, I do see some value potentially in setting a tone for the new administration and for limiting government where it
Yes.
might make sense. And it doesn't limit them. It doesn't really tie their hands. It just increases that threshold in which they go back and modify.
Well, one of the areas that I would concur with that sentiment, and one of the areas I would strongly emphasize is that the legislative body remains a very strong body. I think a lot of the decay we've seen on a national level is because the legislative body has just, passed its responsibility onto rulemaking bureaucracy as opposed to being forced to continue to govern. So as we dive into some details there, I want to make sure that that legislative body maintains a strong active role and is somewhat bound to that, and deferring some of their legislative responsibilities would not be something that they could easily accomplish.
Any other major points, Paul?
Yes, one more. The veto override. So the mayor would have a veto power. Usually the plan will provide what ratio is required on a veto override. Would the commissioners want to specify that as a majority plus one, or a two-thirds override vote, or?
I would be a 2/3 on the override.
I think that makes sense if that's already the override of the other, but so I think that you've raised issues. I think we have enough to move forward to our next meeting to make some progress. So thank you, everyone, for your work on this.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. All the work session items are done. We do have public comment. I know there's been an ask for during public comment. This is a little bit odd, but we're gonna try to work through this.
I don't know if we have time at this point.
I
What do
don't.
you wanna do?
I
Well,
don't
we
know
have
what
to
it
have
is, but
public
I'm fine
comment.
to have it, so.
I know American Fork is here. It looks like there's others that want public comment too. What's your preference? Tell me.
I mean, there's no way we're going to be able to do public comment and closed session and Board of Equalization.
I'd be happy to we just limit them to 2 minutes.
Based on a presentation basis?
Yeah, whatever. We do have to make some decisions of which one, are we gonna cut out closed session? Are we gonna move that till after BOE? We're gonna postpone BOE? Because we can have this, I mean, it's your call, Mr. Chair, but we can have this presentation. I just don't think we're gonna be able to get through all of our planned items prior to 1 PM.
I'm happy to have public comment, but I just
How about
limit
if we,
the
how about
time.
if we have a comment, public comment? Public comment is usually just that, comment. It's not dialogue. It's not like a work session. And how about if we how about if we give general public comment, 3 minutes, and then we give American Fork 5? Is that good? I'm trying to find a balance. Okay. So any public comment, please come on up.
My name is Janice Reed. I live in Hobble Creek Canyon in unincorporated Utah County. I would have bowed out and come another day. I know how busy you are. However, I brought my granddaughter with me today. I gave her the option, you can pull weeds or you can come and listen to what's going on. She said, how long? I said, you move things right along. This is what I wanted to say today. I came to thank you. I came to thank you, to tell you that when you listen to people who are in the unincorporated county, and I do appreciate that attention, although we are able to interact with cities also, that, pardon me, one of the things that has been accomplished has been that the 80-20 ratio, by tightening it that to 85-15, we were able to keep a population at one house for 50 acres instead of 55. It really did make a difference, and I thank you for that. I also thank you for all the attention you've put in place. I want to comment on 3 things. Water rights. I've been studying water rights for now more than a year, and I'm interested on another day to find out about item 9 that has to do with whether or not the county sells or buys shares. I'm from Arizona, extremely important in your progress that water be in place. I know you know that. I would just like to know how it works. Another is the initiative on the ballot. I'm not clear, and I would like to know at another time what the mayor does other than an override. And the third thing is I want to compliment you on, or the staff, whomever, in looking at the possibility of having housing in unincorporated areas. I'm older. I love living in the county. Being able to have a accessory building, kitchen, etc., gives me the opportunity to not have to move into the city, and it opens a door for more housing. Maybe not in a huge way, but a huge way for the county, in an unincorporated county. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Janice.
I too want to thank you for the time that you've given to citizens in the county. I do have some concerns about the new Good Governance Advisory Board and how things are going. I am a county delegate, and I've been contacted by other delegates in our precinct wanting to know when there are going to be public sessions where we can give some input before decisions are made. For instance, has any consideration be given to perhaps 6 districts and a chairman at large instead of several at large people? I have no idea what options have been considered, and don't want to be giving some false options when it comes time for a public comment. There has also been some discussion about concerns that the mayor may have too much power instead of the legislative body having the power that they should people believe that they should have. Again, thank you for your time that you give to citizens in the county.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm Carol Ferguson.
Yes, Carol.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Hi, Mayor Frost, Mayor of Fork City. Thank you. I feel like I've been a part of history here today, watching some of this great dialogue. I'm going to make it real easy for you guys and limit this as quickly as I can. So our request is to be heard and have understanding of our region in our city, the TOD region, where we have a front runner station. And having that is a great responsibility upon our city to make sure that it's appropriately planned. And so with that, there's a lot of different things that converge on a front runner station. Communities from out west, our own community, Lehigh. It's become a very unsafe environment through the travel process, and in fixing and installing a road that's appropriate and that will facilitate not only traffic but pedestrian and bicycle paths. We are looking to do a CRA. Some of that property is in unincorporated Utah County. And so at the very basic level, what we would like to do is do an interlocal agreement with the county so that we can form a CRA so that we can provide mechanisms to make this a thriving community and a development that will benefit all, and all will benefit from it financially as well. And so in closing, and I'll let you go because I know you're busy, what we would like to ask and is to see if we could just move this with what material that we have given you and what we would give you to an action item so that we can move forward in our planning processes. We feel like we're kind of at the threshold now where development is is looking at us, and again, it's just getting unsafer. People are parking alongside the road on unincorporated Utah County lands, and we're having near misses. We've had people hit with their, and flipped over from a car and their bicycle, and we just feel like we need to have a plan, and we need to have the county support to make that happen. And so, would you be willing to let us just come as with proper material and making a decision and an action item rather than stall this out for another month or two so that we can move forward in our planning processes? Or would you prefer a work session? That was our hope, was to get a work session.
I see some, so correct if I'm wrong, there's two issues, essentially. One is, in your TOD, you would prefer, and it would facilitate your planning process if all of that was within the city.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
Second is your conversation about CRA, which for me is an entirely different conversation and an incredibly high bar to get our participation in the CRA.
Right.
But in terms of getting it into the city, my understanding in consultation with our council is that, and we can be supportive of this in the process, is that you have the authority as a city to kind of initiate that annexation.
Well, it's based upon the willingness of the person living in unincorporated Utah County. We have a lot on the threshold, and many that are just kind of waiting to see what will happen. So yes, we do. We don't have the ability to go and force them into American Fork City, but the developers are kind of watching this process. But to plan properly, it's helpful. It's a helpful mechanism for us. And I know that the CRA is another ask. It's another thing that we would have to come forward to you and show numbers and budgets and things like that and how it would benefit all. But initially, we need the mechanism to create a project area, and some of that is outside of our city limits. We have one gentleman that was alluded to that does not want to come into the city. He's made it very known, and we're okay with carving him out. This does not force, I think there's an education that needs to take place. And this does not force annexation. It does not force development. It is a tool if they choose to come forward. And it's and to be a tool to help build infrastructure around the trans-oriented development.
Which I share that goal that you have, Mayor. I mean, if we're going to invest the amount of tax dollars that we do in these transit-oriented districts and bring front runner, there needs to be density around those stations. That's what allows for the use of transit. If there's anywhere in our communities where we need the density, both commercial and residential, it's around our transit centers. So I support in that goal. I do think, now politically there's a conversation and whether you feel comfortable doing that, but I do think that it is within the power of the city of American Fork to initiate that annexation. And so I guess from my perspective, until I'm told otherwise by council, that is something that you can do entirely on your own.
You're talking about forced annexation?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me speak to that. Jason Birmingham with Lewis Young Robertson and Birmingham. We're advising American Fork as a financial advisor and also through the CRA process. I think a couple of issues that might be helpful to understand. A joint CRA, which is somewhat what we're proposing here, because there's unincorporated county areas and there's also a vast majority of this that is within American Fork City. So we're talking about a 500-acre piece that is centered around this transit-oriented development. And you're absolutely right. This is a smart growth initiative. It's built around transportation, transit. It's multiple family oriented development, stacked development. It also has mixed use, office, entertainment, other components that will be there. So the purpose of the CRA, first and foremost, is to bring the critical infrastructure into that area to allow for that dense of a development to exist, which is a taxpayer benefit and also a taxing entity benefit in terms of generating more economic vitality and benefit. The reason that American Fork is actually asking for an interlocal agreement is really to consent or to ask the county's consent to include in the project area, for purposes of the CRA, properties that currently are not part of American Fork City. Now, of the 500 acres, about 350 of those acres are already in American Fork. So there's 130 to 150 acres that are not. There's already 57 acres, 60 acres that are in process of annexation. The rest of them are either acreage that is greenbelt, farming that really has expressed no interest to develop. This CRA does not force them to develop, nor does it force them to annex. I'm not sure that American Fork City wants to proceed with a contestation where they're requiring those properties to be annexed. In fact, that's the exact opposite of what the CRA is, which is an optional ability for property owners to come in and develop if they want to, but doesn't force them to develop. By annexation, you're in essence forcing them to be part of the city and to develop, which is not the intent here. So the interlocal agreement is as simple at this stage, because there's two steps to this, which I think we've identified. One is the consent of unincorporated county to be included in it. The second part of it is a CRA plan and budget. How are the monies going to be used? What infrastructure is going to be put in place? How is it going to benefit the county, school district, the city? So what we're requesting is really that acquiescence, that consent, that a number of these properties that will ultimately benefit from all of these infrastructure improvements that are going in, that they will be part of the tax increment district that can support that infrastructure. Now, if we opt them out, we're going to leave islands of unincorporated area that ultimately will develop. I'll guarantee around this area they will develop, whether the current property owner wants to or not. In the future, they will want to develop, and they've got to get services. And unless the county's going to provide those services, water, sewer, roads, public works, all of that, this is the mechanism where we're going to finance those capital items so that they can benefit from that. So this is really a benefit to all of the taxpayers that are within this area, and the only way we can proceed with unincorporated areas is with the consent of the county. Without it, then we opt them out, try to add them back in, but there's really not a mechanism to add them back in after the fact.
Okay, thank you. We'll probably have to move into our closed meetings.
Okay.
And go from there. Thank you for being here. We will now.
Leave you with some material.
Can I just,
Yeah, you can.
in all respect, can I just kind of get some kind of an indication on what you would have us do next?
Yeah, since we're in public comment, it's not really some, I mean, you can come and talk with us on an individual basis, and I mean, any commissioner can put something on the agenda.
Okay.
So we'll move into our closed meetings. Yeah, I think I've got